one of the lead sponsors, City Councilor Lydia Edwards. I'm also joined by my colleague, City Councilor Anissa Sabi-George, and we'll probably be joined by other colleagues as they're coming in. We are here today to discuss Docket 1399. It is a hearing regarding an ordinance for the establishment of a commission for economic justice in the City of Boston's construction industry. This matter was sponsored by my colleague, City Councilor Lydia Edwards, along with our colleague, City Councilor Kim Janey and City Councilor Ayanna Presley, referred to the committee on September the 19th, 2018. The ordinance seeks to establish a commission to have a biannual review which would assess union and non-union contractors' performance in meeting the standards set by the Boston Residency Job Policy, and would require the commission to also report biannually to the council in a public hearing to discuss the findings. The commission would consist of representatives from each of the 9 council districts selected by the mayor of our city, from nominees put forward by district councilors, as well as 4 representatives appointed by the mayor. 3 of the remaining 4 appointees would fall under the prospective categories: 1 with a history of advocating for the rights of Boston workers and involvement with education, 1 with a history of advocacy for workers of color, 1 with a history of advocacy for women in the construction field. Nominations would be submitted to the mayor's office by community organizations, individuals, and relevant stakeholders. Given that this proposal has to do with the Boston Residency Job Policy, I'd like to highlight a few of the following for historical reference. The Boston Residency Job Policy was championed in 1983 by the late City Councilor Bruce Bowling. Then Mayor Ray Flynn, father of my colleague who just arrived here, City Councilor Ed Flynn, extended the Boston Residency Job Policy through an executive order in 1985 to cover private construction projects over 100,000 square feet that also required zoning relief. For almost 40 years, the city ordinance required construction companies to demonstrate good faith efforts to guarantee that half of all of our workers are Boston residents, 25% workers of color, and 10% women. I know that in the early 2000s, working closely with myself and Councilor Chuck Turner, we had advanced the ball on a number of Boston Residency Job Policy initiatives. And then in 2010, Councilor Ross and Councilor Presley spearheaded an effort to update the policy to make all of that data public. And most recently in 2017, I, as the chair of the Committee on Government Operations, worked along with my council colleagues to pass Mayor Walsh's amendments to the Boston Residency Job Policy to reflect the changing demographics of our city, requiring 50% residents, 25% people of color, and 10% women. And that was then amended to 51%, 40%, and 12% respectively. Last month, Councilor Edwards sponsored a hearing with a committee for jobs, wages, and workforce development to review the current practices and data of the Boston Residency Job Policy, as well as the Boston Employment Commission. So I'd like to take note now that this hearing is being recorded, will be broadcast at a later date on Comcast 8, RCN, Channel 82, Verizon 1964, and also streamlined on the Boston City Council TV online. And we have just two administrative issues here. One is both of my colleagues had sent letters in. First, City Councilor Ayanna Presley. Dear Mr. Chairman, I regret, due to my previously scheduled being a new member of the Congress orientation in Washington, D.C., I will not be able to attend today's Committee on Government Operations hearing regarding an ordinance for the establishment of a Commission for Economic Justice in the City of Boston. I want to thank the Chair for hosting this hearing and my co-sponsors for elevating this critical conversation. Thank you, special thank you to former City Councilor Chuck Turner and the entire coalition for their vision and partnership in creating economic justice in Boston. I believe that this commission is an important step towards keeping us all accountable for the goal of inclusion in the construction industry. I strongly support this ordinance and urge my colleagues to do the same. I'm sorry I'm not able to be there in person today, but I look forward to reviewing the recording, and we'll have staff present. Thank you, City Councilor at Large Ayanna Presley, and also in receipt of a letter from our colleague, City Councilor Kim Janey. Dear Mr. Chair, I regret, due to traveling for a wedding, I'm unable to attend today's hearing on the Committee on Government Operations Ordinance for establishment of a Commission on Economic Justice in the City of Boston. I'm very proud to be a co-sponsor of this matter, along with Councilor Edwards and Presley. Currently, there's $9 billion in active construction projects, with $6 billion more in the pipeline. This represents a massive amount of money, and it's important that Boston residents, people of color, and women be able to receive a fair percentage of this money. The ordinance will straighten our current tools for monitoring construction projects to help us create equitable opportunities. My staff will be in attendance at the hearing and look forward to reviewing the recording. Please read this into the record. Sincerely, Kim Janey, Boston City Council, District 7. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, lead sponsor, for an opening comment, and then we'll get right into the panel. I know we're joined here by Chief Barros, and we're also joined by Mr. Watson, Travis Watson, who's chair of the Boston Employment Commission. So, Chair recognizes Councilor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair, and I just wanted to say thank you to all the folks who made it here today on a Friday afternoon. I understand that oftentimes having day hearings makes it very difficult for working people to be here, so your participation, your presence means a lot and really demonstrates your dedication and commitment to making sure that people of color, women, and Boston residents are working regularly in the trades and making sure that they're part of receiving the massive amount of wealth that we are creating through the development. Earlier this year, we held the first oversight hearing on the Boston residents' jobs policy mandated by the 2017 updates. And I want to thank Chief Barros and his team and Travis Watson for actually coming there to testify. I think the whole majority of the BEC showed up. You showed the statistics, you showed how we're going to get this done, and it was an important conversation that we're kicking off and will continue with full transparency about the good, the bad, the ugly, and how we're going to make sure that we comply with the Boston resident job policy. I also want to thank my co-sponsors, Councilor Kim Janey, who regularly and personally monitors job sites in Roxbury, and also, of course, Councilor Presley, who is now going to fight for all of us in DC. Advocates, while appreciative of the good work of the BEC, have raised concerns that some barriers to equity remain unaddressed and proposed an Economic Justice Commission to really help deal with those issues. As seen in the ordinance, it's a useful tool for overcoming some of those barriers. It launches a conversation and actually puts the people who are directly impacted by these issues at the forefront of helping to come up with some of the solutions and having those conversations. It's a rich dialogue that we certainly need, and I don't think anyone is opposed to that. And we've worked with the Chairman's office, Chairman Michael Flaherty, to invite the community, labor, open shops, developers, and contractors data to really kick off that conversation. So I just want to say thank you, and I'll turn it over to you guys.
Very good. Unless my colleagues have any additional opening comments, Councilor Flynn.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty, and to Councilor Edwards for your leadership on issues impacting working men and women across our city. It's an honor for me to be with you and with brothers and sisters in the labor movement as well. I think we all want to see jobs for Boston residents, especially when the economy is going so well. As mentioned in the order for this hearing in 1986, my father worked with the City Council to pass such an ordinance establishing the Boston Employment Commission to enforce hiring practices. And I was also proud to have served for 10 years working as a probation officer at NAGE, National Association of Government Employees. And I think the best experience that taught me about this job on the City Council is listening to labor leaders across the city, fighting for social and economic justice, decent wages, health care. We saw Local 26 fight hard, making sure that their workers were treated with respect and dignity. No one gave them a chance, but they came together as a team and demanded justice. I think that's what we're all here for, is to make sure that the voices of working men and women are heard in the city and heard in the state, and they want a decent wage, good access to public, to health care, safe working conditions, and it's really the unions, in my opinion, that helped build this city, and they continue to give back, whether it's in different athletic programs or after-school programs. Our labor union brothers and sisters, once their tour ends at 6 o'clock, they're active in the neighborhoods. They're active in PTA, coaching Little League. So Boston's a union city, and our union members continue to make great progress in building the city. And I'm proud to sit with you and stand with you on the picket line. And that's something, as a city council, I'll always be there for the working men and women of our city, and proud that we have so many union members here today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn, and Councilor Asabi-George is graciously waiving opening. A quick question, Richard Taylor, I think I committed to, you had a time scheduling conflict, is that my understanding? And if that's the case, you're more than welcome to come down here, and I will take your testimony first as a courtesy to you and your schedule. So if you can come right down to that first microphone and just introduce yourself and your affiliation. I mean, I know who you are and where you work, but if you...
To the councilors and to Lydia Edwards, Councilor Edwards, who pushed this forward, Chief Barrows and team. First, I wanted to say that it's important to commend the current administration for increasing the goals. Richard Taylor, I'm president of Minority Developers Association, chairman of Taylor Smith Developers, and the co-owner of the new Boston Omni Hotel going up now in the Seaport area. And thank you, Councilor Faraday, for your help on that. We all know that there's an income inequality issue here in our city. And when we look at the construction industry, it is particularly important that these issues get sorted out. Why do I say that? We have a boom in this city that most cities would just thirst for. I mean, if you look at, Chief, your negotiations with Amazon, we are one of the few cities who could live without them having a second headquarters here. Notwithstanding, they're also going to have 1 million square feet. We have billions of dollars of construction. There are women who have single heads of household, men of color who are trying to run their families, men and women who come out of prison who need these jobs. We don't have to have 2 and 3 degrees to qualify for the work. Everybody goes through the training program, so the money and the benefits that Councilor Flynn referenced are critical to increasing the income of all in our city. I wholeheartedly support this Commission on Economic Justice, but I would make several recommendations. The first is that we have a union training plan that is filed with the city. Why do I say that? The biggest issue that we have is pipeline. And it seems to me that the union should identify a need going forward 3 to 5 to 7 years out. We all know there are various economic cycles, but they have to confront the training of the pipeline, because what we don't want to be in a position of saying we don't have a percentage of minorities, we don't have a percentage of women because they're not available. That particular training plan should be filed with you, Councilor Flaherty, and your committee, with Chief Barrows, and they should be required to report on that on a semi-annually basis. It's as simple as garbage in, garbage out. If we don't have training, we can't have adequate representatives from the stakeholders in the city, number one. Number two, what is also absent from this ordinance is drafted, this great ordinance is drafted, is the participation of developers and owners of the larger projects. I'm part of a team that gets designated for a hotel. We hire the contractor. The contractor works with the unions. So the agreements between the owners and the contractors have to also represent these numbers. If we simply push it down to the contractor and to the unions, there's a step that is missing. The contractor is accountable to me, not to anyone else, not to the city, although we have to comply with the plan, but the owners and developers are a missing segment from this particular ordinance. I also think that the data, you mentioned public hearings, the data for these hearings that come twice a year need to be published in a form that is available to the organizations, the advocacy groups, the labor groups, the Minority Contractors Association, and the minority developers. Those are my recommendations, but I would say this. This is a very, very important hearing. I commend you for hosting it. I commend the leaders from the council who chaired it and teed it up. If Boston is to move the dial at all on income inequality, it'll be through the construction industry, and I'm happy to be part of it. Thank you very much for allowing me to share my comments.
Very good, and thank you, Richard, for being here. And I also, and again, Chair's prerogative, I also had invited Anthony Richards here, and I know he's on a tight frame. So, Tony, can you come down? He's a friend of mine, and I know that he, I think, single-handedly probably puts more men and women from the community through and into the trade. So, no introduction, founder of No Books, No Balls, but you have the floor, and you were kind enough to accept my invitation to be here.
Oh, thank you, Councilor. Just reiterating what Mr. Taylor spoke about. It's, I think that's an integral part of having a relationship build, making sure that the owner is held accountable, working in conjunction with the developer that will sprinkle down to the contractor. without having those components, being in the building industry for close to 30 years, there's always a lapse of accountability when it comes time to policing the numbers and making sure that the criteria stays fit on jobs. But, you know, having other components held responsible and held liable, I think will strengthen the relationship and the number criteria to make sure that it's met. So again, I applaud this meeting and having conversation and dialogue with how to move this needle forward and to create some health and wealth in our community and our job base. So thank you, Councilor.
Thank you, Tony, for the work that you do.
Thank you.
Every day, not just occasionally, every day. Chief, welcome. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
I've seen a lot of you lately. You're not running for city council by any chance, are you?
No, but I'm getting pretty comfortable here.
Good to see you again, and I know you're with Travis, so you have the floor. Introduce yourself for the record and tell us your thoughts.
Thank you. For the record, John Barrows, Chief of Economic Development for the City of Boston. Good afternoon, Chairman Flaherty, Councilor Edwards. Thank you for you and the co-sponsors, Councilor Finn, Councilor Sabi George. I really appreciate the leadership of the council in this conversation. So I wanted to say thank you for the invitation to testify on this important work. And I want to recognize members of my department that are here, recognize Commissioner Watson here with me. But I also want to say thank you to community advocates that have worked tirelessly with us to make sure that we move forward on the issue of collaboration to ensure more residents, more people of color, more women are included in the public and private development in the city of Boston and are benefiting from the construction boom of our economy. Currently, we have $9.3 billion of construction actively on the, in Boston, and we've just approved another $6.8 billion during this calendar year. So in fact, it is an injustice to not have all Bostonians participate in that kind of economic activity. As you recall from our hearing on the status of the Boston residents' job policy and the Boston Employment Commission last month, we have made progress over the last 2 years since we updated the BRJP in January 2017. However, there's a lot of work to do. Before I talk about that work, I want to recognize a couple of leaders in the room who have helped us move it forward. And there's a lot of people that continue to partner with the city, partner with all of us to do this work. But I want to particularly recognize the former city councilor, Chuck Turner, who is here, and his work in leadership, not only on the council, but as a coordinator of the Boston Jobs Coalition. And if you could allow me, I'd love to give him a hand at this point for the work that he's done. I'd also like to recognize our counterpart, a colleague who is also equally valuable in this conversation and has shown real leadership, and that's Brian Doherty, the head of the Building and Construction Trade Council. Brian has been a friend, has supported the movement and changes that we've made in the BRJP. And the work that we continue to talk about today. And it's nice to have in Boston a community of people who really care about this, from political leadership, community activists, union and trades, developers. So for me, it's great to be on an issue where there's alignment. What you see in front of us is clearly work we need to do. And the new BRJP ordinance that you passed helps us do it. I want to recognize the director of our new Equity and Inclusion Unit, who is sitting with us here today, Selena Barrios-Milner, who is sitting over here. If you could just wave your hand. Thank you, Selena. We also want to recognize, thank you, want to recognize the rest of the BRJP staff and staff of the Equity and Inclusion Unit who are here with us. We have laid down a new ordinance that allows us to collect more information and data. In fact, the ordinance is very specific on what we need to collect, and the ordinance allows us to levy fees and fines if people are not cooperating in collecting the information that we need to collect so that we can assess the availability of workers to meet our goals. With that said, Mayor Walsh and administration would like to continue the progress made with the Boston Employment Commission, with the City Council, with the new ordinance, and we believe that this data tracking, monitoring, and reporting is within the scope of what this ordinance is looking for and will allow us to set up the conversation that is being asked for here. We are here in support and look forward to the conversation.
Very good. Thank you, Chief.
Travis Watson, Chair of the Boston Employment Commission. Chairman Flaherty, Councilor Flynn, Councilor Edwards, and Councilor Asabi George. It's a pleasure to be here today. Just want to quickly also recognize all the tradespeople in the room. It's really amazing to have you guys out here. Thank you. As Chair of the Boston Employment Commission, I assist the Mayor's Office of Economic Development, specifically the Equity and Inclusion Unit, to maximize the participation of Boston residents, people of color, and women on private and public development projects in the city of Boston. About a month ago, I had the honor and privilege to testify on behalf of Docket 1398 in order for a hearing regarding a biannual review of the Boston Employment Commission and Boston Residents' Jobs Policy. During the hearing, along with my colleagues from the Mayor's Office of Economic Development, I updated the Boston City Council's Committee on Jobs, Wages, and Workforce Development on the work of the Boston Employment Commission and the Boston Residents' Jobs Policy. Today, I'm going to dig a little bit deeper and briefly outline the work that the Commission is doing to build relationships with both union and non-union sectors, as well as my thoughts on data and its value in helping create a more inclusive and equitable construction industry here in Boston. The BRJP office and the Boston Employment Commission have strong relationships with the union building trades. I have an open line of communication and meet regularly with Brian Doherty, the Secretary General Agent of the Building and Construction Trades Council of Metropolitan District. Brian and I are actively exploring ways to increase resident, people of color, and female participation in the trades. I've been invited to and plan to speak to the Building and Construction Trades Council of the Metropolitan District about ways the council and the BRJP office can work together to meet the goals of the BRJP. Business agents from the plumbers, iron workers, and pipe fitters have attended Boston Employment Commission meetings in the past year and have offered immediate assistance to non-compliant contractors. Andrew D'Angelo from Building Pathways frequently attends BEC meetings as a key partner in the work. From January 2018 to October 2018, we have met with representatives from the carpenters, the roofers and waterproofers, the electricians, the pile drivers, plumbers and gas fitters, painters and allied trades, operating engineers, plasterers, and cement masons, and the laborers. During these meetings, we assess the performance of the trades in meeting the standards of the BRJP. Additionally, we assess their plans to increase the number of Boston residents, people of color, and women. We plan to continue these meetings, meet with trades that we haven't met with, and use the data collected to better inform our strategies for increasing the number of Boston residents, people of color, and women entering union apprenticeship programs. Working with the Construction Trades Council of the Metropolitan District on compliance with the BRJP has been a lot easier than the open shop world. That reason is twofold. First, union leadership has not only been willing to work with us towards compliance, but they are active thought partners on working towards a more inclusive and equitable industry. Union representatives like Charlie Cofield from the carpenters, Mark Fortune of the sprinkler fitters, Barry Keaty and Tim Fandel from the plumbers, Vinnie Coyle and Mike Hess from the ironworkers, Brian Kelly from the pipe fitters, and Brian Doherty have been key allies in this work. Second, the Construction Trades Council of the Metropolitan District represents 20 local construction unions and more than 3,300 union contractors. Communication with a few business agents trickles down to the thousands of contractors and members and helps streamline communication with the BRJP. In comparison, the non-union world is a bit different. As far as I know, the largest open or merit shop trade association in Massachusetts is the Massachusetts chapter of Associated Builders and Contractors, or ABC Mass. They represent over 400 open shop contractors. I've met with ABC Mass's president and CEO, Greg Beeman, and I believe that he and his team are committed to working towards creating a more inclusive and equitable construction industry. However, there's a data challenge. The Construction Trades Council, as I mentioned earlier, represents over 3,300 union contractors. ABC Mass, as I just mentioned, represents 400 open shop contractors. It's obvious but worth noting that is an almost 3,000 difference in contractor representation. If the BEC has a non-compliant union contractor, I can easily contact the business agent and get a better understanding behind the non-compliance. However, if the non-compliant contractor is open shop, it's likely that they don't belong to a trades association, and that makes getting to the root of non-compliance a bit trickier. With that said, the BRJP office is going to continue to meet with non-union contractors with the most amount of work in the city and review their plans for increasing their employment of Boston residents, people of color, and women. Additionally, we will explore how the non-union sector, besides ABC MA's Merit Apprenticeship Program, plans to train the next generation of workers. There's a lot of work to be done to increase the number of Boston residents, people of color, and women working in Boston and entering apprenticeship programs. I am confident that we have the relationships and have laid the groundwork to begin to make major inroads. The data that we have been collecting and will continue to collect will help inform the work and allow the BRJP office to be strategic as we work towards a more inclusive and equitable construction industry here in Boston. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here today.
Thank you very much, Travis. Obviously, things you've outlined are things that should have happened a long time ago. Hate to be the skunk of the party, but we missed so many opportunities. And glad that this administration and those relationships were able to bring all those folks together. So you just think about those missed opportunities and just makes you shake your head. Just a quick question, and it's the same question I was going to ask my former colleague, Councilor Turner, when he comes down to testify. But so the BEC has the authority to issue fines to companies that are in non-compliance with the Boston Residential Job Policy. So therein lies sort of the stick. That's the teeth. Would it make sense to merge this proposed commission with the BEC, with the BEC? Does that make any sense? And it's just to noodle it. And I tend to think sometimes we study things too much. We commission stuff too much. It's like, let's just get it done. And let's hold people accountable that are not doing it. I'm kind of a fish and cut bait type of person, but maybe it makes sense to have two commissions on parallel tracks working with each other. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. So that question, again, food for thought. I'm going to pose the same question to Councilor Turner as well, just to see what he thinks about it. We currently have a mechanism in place whereby you have the ability and the authority to kind of step in. And do we have the ability with this proposal, Councilor Edwards has, Councilor Janey and Councilor Presley, and have them kind of morph into one so that we have a broad-based commission, but at the same time we actually have enforcement authority, if you will. So again, just want to get your thoughts on that.
You want to start, Chief? When I first heard about this commission, my initial reaction working in construction workforce compliance for the past 12 to 14 years was excitement, because 10 years ago there weren't as many people actively excited to engage in this kind of work. So my initial thought was, man, this is great. We've got all these folks here that are trying to get more Boston residents, people of color, and women jobs in the city of Boston. That's amazing. That's great. What I'm cautious of is the duplication and replication of work, which I think you might be getting at a little bit. So I think that there's an opportunity for the Boston Employment Commission to take on this work, because I think I tried my best to outline that I believe in the last year or so we have been doing that. But I'm also of the position that as many people in the city of Boston that are actively working on these issues, that are actively pushing contractors to hire folks from our city, people of color and women, it's a big cliche, but the more the merrier. I think that the more folks working on this, it's going to lead to richer outcomes for our folks.
Yeah, no, I share the commissioner's sentiments. I think when this was first raised in the conversations around the changing of the BRJP, the updating of the BRJP, we then at that point agreed that this work needs to be done. And in fact, absent of this, I know Commissioner Watson has been trying to figure out when we do collect enough data and we have some cycles here and we can actually show what we think is our trends, or ability for certain unions and certain open shop companies to supply the kind of talent we're looking for. We think those conversations are going to be very fruitful I think it makes sense to have it at the same table with the same people who can levy fines and who are having the conversations about the numbers. I know there are some nuance in here that we would need to talk about, right, in terms of, how that happens and who's involved, et cetera, and I think those conversations can happen.
Okay. And from, I guess, the apprenticeship side of the house, that information, that data is important as they're putting the unions are putting apprenticeship classes on, making sure that, the bench is deep enough, if you will, to accomplish the goals and the objectives of the Boston Residency Job Policy. So if there's going to be, say they're going to be putting on 20 electricians over at 103, and 5 of them are from Wilmington, and 2 of them are from Melrose, and 6 of them are from Saugus, and, well, we got 1 kid from Dorchester, 1 kid from Roxbury, 1 kid from Southie, and we got 2 kids from Braintree. That's not satisfying the sort of the goals and the objectives. So I think having that data, if you will, I don't even know, there's a name they call it, but having them sort of be forthright with their demographics, if you will, with their current existing membership, active members, will help us, I think, help them in terms of putting the best and the right candidates forward with respect to their apprentice program. So other than that, we're just going to continue to chase our tail. So if unions are graduating apprentices every year and they're not 51% people from the city, and if they're not, 40% people of color and they're not 12% women, then we're going to be having the same conversation 5, 7, 10 years from now. So I think that data is important, but the sharing of the information in terms of the current and existing makeup of those unions is just as important and critical as they're putting their apprentice programs together every year.
That's right.
In partnership with the Path A's program, in partnership with our Madison Park Vocational Technical School and our other partners that are out there. I think it's got to be working on all cylinders.
Yeah. What the new ordinance is asking for, in fact, is when a GC or a sub approaches a business agent, there is documented communication about ability to respond or not respond to a request to provide an employee a tradesperson of a certain demographics. And so we are steadily documenting that local's ability to do that or not. So after a couple of cycles of this, we would have some trends, and we'd be able to at least from a very current, not thinking about, sort of who was on, not on, what the, bench looks like, et cetera, what people can do right now. And I think that's an important conversation to have with that kind of data at the table.
Yeah, and I would just add that, as an example, the plumbers, Barry Keating, so I'm talking data and union representation at the back has created instant jobs on the spot. So Barry, not to call him out, but he's been tremendous. Get the packet a week before the Boston Employment Commission hearings. If there's a plumber, a subcontractor that's out of compliance, quick email, phone call over to Barry. He's said, well, I've got 3 Boston residents. I'll be at that meeting. He's at the meeting. I asked the contractor, have you contacted the unions? Because I know, for example, that you have there's 3 Boston residents available. And, well, I haven't called the unions. And then, boom, Barry Keating's right in attendance, and he's right there, and will say, I've got 3 Boston residents. You should be, putting them on the job tomorrow. So that kind of, 1, it's the data, but 2, it's the relationship piece. And I like it because it's putting people on the spot. It's putting people who need to be put on the spot.
Yeah, true. Good. Councilor Edwards, any questions of this panel?
Yeah. So I guess I just want to make very clear about your position. You are or not taking a position on the creating of the commission, this new commission?
We feel that the work that the commission is outlining is critical. We do believe, in fact, that the BEC could perform this.
Okay.
So our position on the work that's being carried out here is we absolutely support it.
But that it would be something that could be housed under the BEC?
It's something that could be housed under the BEC.
So, so then if we're going to talk about the BEC and some of the things that could be housed under it, I guess I would have some questions then about how, would you consider then this ordinance, for example, changes the makeup of who can appoint to the commission and also who would be on the commission? Would you be open then to the BEC having different or a larger amount of folks in community representation following the guidelines in this ordinance on the BEC?
I think there is a conversation to be had about, because this clearly changes the appointment structure and a couple of other things in here too that's important to weigh. So I think all that needs to be weighed and have a conversation with you guys, whether it's a working session or something, to really kind of get into the nitty-gritties about what can happen.
So, and I guess, you know, at some point, we're going to have to make a decision, is what's more flexible, creating a new commission that can move around the BEC and add to specific granular conversations that the BEC may not be having, or is having individually, you know, when you're calling up the unions and talking to them and doing the work, whether that is, it's faster to create a commission that just does that at the larger level and just brings the unions in, brings the non-union shops in and says, let's talk about this on a biannual, open, transparent process. Is that faster to adjust with a new commission, with new folks, or are you suggesting that it's faster to adjust and then have the BEC perform that role?
So I think those conversations are worth having, because if we decide, in fact, that the BEC, given its own workload, given what's happening at the BEC and what it does, is not the most flexible vehicle for this, then we're not objecting to a new commission.
Okay. And then so the other thing that I would be concerned or needs to happen in this conversation is, because you have enforcement power, as in you can fine entities, and because this ordinance would be bringing unions into a certain standard and conversation, a concern would be that you could be levying fines against unions for noncompliance. That concerns me personally. And I just want to make sure that in the crossing of the conversations, you could bring in folks and entities under compliance also with an enforcement power. So again, we don't have to hash out that conversation right now, but when you talk about duplicative components and you guys have not only the carrot and the stick, and we're bringing in, instead of creating a new commission that does not have fines, that does not necessarily punish, but you bring them under your umbrella, you could be ending up doing, well, you can end up punishing some entities who are trying to do the right thing. The other point I wanted to also make is with the BEC and how you're keeping and maintaining categories of residents, women and people of color, and maintaining that kind of double counting, maintaining it. For some of your data, while you may contain that for the compliance with the Boston Jobs residence policy, would it make sense for you to further break down for education purposes, women versus women of color versus Boston job residents, to break that down? Again, compliance, keep the double counting, which I have learned is actually helping, in many cases, women of color to increase their numbers. So for compliance, leaving it there. But for education purposes, to break down then the numbers. Would you consider doing that?
Yes, I believe that is already being done right now.
Okay.
Internally, I believe that we have that information broken down that way.
Other points of data that have also been suggested, I think it's from the Building Trades Employers Association, for this, and I'll ask these questions to also to Mr. Turner as well. But one component of data that they suggested, and this might also be worth looking at, is to improve data collection and reporting under the BRJP, specifying union versus non-union signatory companies, and include reporting date to identify trends over time. Do you do that?
Yeah. So at every BEC hearing, one of the general first questions is this a file subject project? Are you signatory with any unions? Mm-hmm. So over time doing it, I think we being the commission, have an idea of who that is. I think we can do a better job at memorializing that, putting it on an actual document, and making it transparent.
And by the way, I'm not saying to do it or not. I'm wondering if it's happening and if you have an opinion about it happening. The other suggestion was to request changes to reporting of apprenticeship programs to the Massachusetts Department of Apprenticeship Standards, which captures data on who enters a registered apprenticeship program, but not who graduates.
Interesting.
Worth collecting opinion about that?
I think it's absolutely worth collecting.
Okay. And then also that as this current ordinance stands, it requests information to assess the performance of each of the trade unions in meeting the standards of the policy, the jobs policy, and also to assess each union's plan to increase the number of Boston residents and so on and so forth. That's the current language in the proposed commission. This was also suggesting that be applied to the pre-apprenticeship programs, as I think my colleague had brought up, but to look at whether the pre-apprenticeship programs should have the policy apply to them, and also their plan to come into compliance. Do you have an opinion about that? Do you do that now?
Absolutely makes sense. I don't believe we do that
We
right now.
don't do
but-
that right now. We think that that would be a good practice.
Okay, so because, this was suggested for the new commission, but I wanted, since you guys think it's a merge
Yeah.
possibility.
Yep.
So those are my questions.
I think, like, just generally, not to interject, I think 10 years ago or so, that this construction compliance world, and in my experiences, was very anecdotal. And it was, I heard, or they're not doing this, or my experience was. The more data that we have, the more data informed I think that the commission can be, is just going to lead to richer outcomes. So I'm all for as much of this data as we can get to kind of help shift and shape the way that we're going to move in 2019.
Okay.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilor Ed Flynn.
Thank you,
We've also been joined by our colleague, City Councilor Matt O'Malley.
Thank you, gentlemen. I just have one question. When I drive around District 2 or I drive around the city, I see a lot of economic development taking place, but I can generally tell, observing what building there are union members that are working and what building there aren't union workers working there, and I base that on the safety. I see a lot of reckless activities happening with non-union workers. They're not getting the job protection, safety in the workplace. On the other hand, our union workers have great safety programs. I also heard and see a lot of non-union companies that don't treat their workers fairly, and at times they don't even pay them. They exploit them. They exploit a lot of immigrants. And I do see a lot of products that are put up in Boston that aren't good quality. Whether it's a single family or a two-family home or a three-family home, non-union contractors, construction workers, it's not a good product. They're not getting paid well. But what are we doing to enforce safety in the workplace for all workers? And is this part of the commission? Is this part of your plan to make sure that every worker has, decent health care, safety in the workplace, that they get paid a decent wage, and that they actually get a check every week, and they get fairness and they're treated with respect and dignity? Can you factor all those in?
So as Chief of Economic Development for the city, absolutely. There is, in fact, I would reference similar work, but in a different lane that we have done, again, with community partnership. And I want to call out the BJC once again for helping us get to new language that the city has adopted in its RFPs on city land. So if you look at the 4 recent RFPs that was put out for public land in the Dudley Square area, you will find language on good jobs, right? And so we are, in fact, asking that developers on that site respond very clearly to us and the community on how they would bring good jobs on that site, whether construction and, more importantly, permanently, right? So, wages that are paid, fair wages, livable wages, conditions, the kind of jobs that you and I would expect and we should fight for every Boston resident to have. So there are efforts like that underway. I often talk about the importance of good jobs. We need to do more in this area. In fact, in some of the conversations we've had internally, we might need to seek more legislative authority to do more in this area. But at this point, any tool that we have at our disposal, we are trying to ask for a responsiveness around good jobs for the city of Boston and its residents.
Thank you, Chief. I had the opportunity recently to talk to the Attorney General, Maura Healey, and she was telling me about her wage theft campaign. A lot of workers exploited, taken advantage of, not getting getting their paycheck. It's a huge problem throughout Massachusetts. Are we also tracking that data here in Boston? And if we are, what is the procedure to help those workers or go after the company or prosecute the company for not paying workers?
So Boston does have a consumer affairs department. And I want to say, Counselor, and I'll have to get back to you on the actual number, but we fight on behalf of both small businesses and individuals to make sure that people are treated fairly. There's about maybe 300,000 that we will be able to bring back to residents and business owners of the city of Boston. I know the Attorney General has the real authority, and like in many areas, we don't have much authority there, but we work very closely with the Attorney General's office, support her efforts in that area. And let me get back to you with some numbers. Let me get back to you on what we're tracking to make sure that I accurately represent the work of the city of Boston in that space.
Yeah, thank you, Chief, and I just want to say thank you to you for your great work for so many years in this city as well.
Appreciate it, Councilor.
Thank you, Councilor. Chair recognizes Councilor Anissa Sabi-George. Any questions of the panel?
I do. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the lead sponsors on this effort. Could we talk a little bit about any directed integration of the students and the work that's happening at Madison Park Vocational Technical Education High School and the work that's happening across our city? We had a hearing earlier this week, over 4 hours of people that are really interested in the future of Madison and its future success. Some great things happening there. One of the greatest challenges is expanding the partnerships so our kids, our city's kids, have access to some really fantastic job opportunities in our city.
So, Councilor, thank you for the question. Vocational education is of extreme importance. I'm currently working with Madison to make sure that.
Just John, play through it.
Sorry. Currently working with Superintendent, Interim Superintendent Laura Perrell, to extend the opportunity for current Madison students to be on current work sites on public land, right? And so it's an effort that is ongoing, and we've had some traction on, that we at least need to open up work directly on city land to our students in a way that is tied with educational opportunities and support, and that we can make sure that they have a positive experience. The other effort that I know is going on is the partnership with the, I want to say Local 35 painters.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and you're familiar with that. So we can rattle off programs and partnerships. I think we probably would both agree that more needs to be done in this area, and that VOTEC training is something that is really important, and Madison Park, the partnership with Madison Park is extremely important.
Well, if we can expand those partnerships
Yep.
so that graduates of Madison Park can be on job sites across the city of Boston,
Right.
we're going to be able to fulfill the residents' jobs requirement across the board. In an ideal world, which I pretend to live in sometimes, I'd love to see signs on all of our jobs that say Madison Park graduates work here. And, for me, it's really important that we're constantly looking for ways to put our kids and graduates of our schools to work on every job site. And that's just thinking about the construction trades. I'd also like to see your office maybe play a bigger role in connecting with the unions who I think are looking to expand some of their training capacity to utilize the Madison Park space. That should be a 16-hour-a-day campus where we can train workers, retrain workers, and create some more space for that training to happen so that jobs can really remain local. It's very frustrating when going by any work site in the city of Boston and seeing out-of-state plates from pretty far away.
Yeah.
And we've got men and women across the city sitting on benches in union halls, not going to work. And we've got to put our people to work, and we have to do it with a concerted effort. And I think it needs to, all hands on deck to get that done. That's it for me. Thank you, Chair.
Counselor, if I may.
Please.
Another model that I would love to see replicated with Madison Park. So, gosh, my memory has slipped me, but I would say it was maybe 3 or 4 years ago at the beginning of the school year. As we all remember, there were students not able to go to class at Madison Park because they didn't have schedules. I don't know if you remember this, but it was about a week and a half,
Yeah.
and there was a great, but at that same time where the vast majority of those students were walking around without classes, there was a small cohort. It was a partnership between Dudley Neighbors Incorporated, Youth Build Boston, and Madison Park students, and they were constructing a house on North Ave. So, at that point, I was living right down in Brighton, so I was driving down Malcolm X Boulevard, and I'd see the students outside. I'd drive down, park on Dudley Street, go to work, and then all of a sudden, I'd see these students from Madison Park working, building a house right in the neighborhood. Many of the students live there. Long-winded way of saying I think that's a really great model between a partnership between two nonprofits in Madison Park that had students building a house right in the neighborhood where some of them. So it's just another model to think about looking at.
Thank you very much. Chair recognizes City Councilman O'Malley. Any questions of this panel?
Very, very briefly, more of a statement. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the makers for their hard work. Thank you, gentlemen, for your great work. I know we all sit here or stand here committed to doing everything that we can to have a workforce, not only in the city, in our building trades, in our private sector, that reflects the vibrancy and the diversity of the city that we love and that we are lucky enough to live in. So anything we can do in terms of strengthening standards, strengthening recruitment, strengthening reporting mechanisms, we ought to be doing. So I'm sure you went over several other issues at the beginning of this hearing. I apologize for my tardiness. I will review the tape and look forward to hearing public testimony forthwith. Thank you.
Thank you. We're also been joined by our colleague, City Council Michelle Wu. Any comments at this time?
No, just here to support the authors and voice my support for the initiative. Thank you so much for all of your work. We've seen each other very recently, often, and want to make sure that the City of Boston is taking every possible step that we can to not just put the policies in place, but then also put our money where our mouth is too. So I think this push dovetailing nicely with the efforts that are happening around procurement and making sure we're opening up equity and opportunities to contract with the city, and then again, as well as continuing to strengthen BRJP and living wage and other mechanisms. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Councilor Wu. That'll conclude this panel. Thank you both, Chief and Travis. You're more than welcome to stick around for a little bit. We're going to shift to the union panel. I see my good friend Brian Doherty's here, and along with Mary Vogel, LaBelle Armstrong, and Canal Broomstein from 103. So if they can come down into the well. Enjoy your weekend, John and Travis. Yeah, I can. They're coming now. They're trying to figure out what they want to do. Brian, have I correctly stated everyone in the union panel? Is there anyone that I supposed to? Very good. Thank you. Welcome, everybody, to the Boston City Council chamber. You want to start it off, Brian? Sure. Introduce yourself for the record and any affiliation that you all have, and then we'll go right down the line.
Wonderful.
Very good.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty, Councilor Flynn, Councilor Edwards, Councilor Asabi George, Councilor O'Malley, Councilor Wu. Just on behalf of the building trades, we really appreciate all of your advocacy to strengthen our communities and our city of Boston, so thank you. My name is Brian Doherty, lifelong Boston resident, grew up in Dorchester, and also have the privilege of being here with several of my sisters and brothers in the local unions to talk about additional equity in the construction industry. So I would just like to start by saying I think that you'll meet the rest of the panelists after I finish, and I appreciate the panelists being alongside me here. But it's a very important topic, and on behalf of the building trades unions, we're here to say that we support any initiative that would strengthen equity, strengthen inclusivity, strengthen access for folks in our communities to have access to good jobs that pay the bills, provide some good health care benefits, and some dignity in their retirement after a hard life's career of work. So just, I'll jump right into my comments. The building trades for a long time has not provided the intentional efforts to make sure that equity is met in our industry. The building trades unions are committed to access to wages and benefits, but for 100 years, it was for very few people. It wasn't for everyone. The past is shameful, and over the past few years, we are doing our best to change the history because we have a team in place that is committed to making things better for every person. So we're here today to say we own our history. I think we have an incredible team in this room today and a much larger team outside this room who are still working that are focused on creating greater equity for everyone. And before I really start my comments, I'd like to thank the several building trades members who are here today who gave up, who left at lunchtime, who could still be working, but instead decided to join us for this very important conversation. So thank you to everyone who did that this afternoon. Again, I've been doing this for about 20 years. I worked in the trades and had the opportunity 6 years ago to join a nonprofit organization underneath or within the building trades unions. My predecessor, Martin J. Walsh, took over the building trades in 2011. He came in and simply said, the building trades does great things for families, good wages, good benefits, access to appropriate training, safe work sites, and again, that dignified retirement, but it doesn't do it for everyone. So he rallied the entire team and he said, we have to do more. We have to reach out to every community, every underrepresented group. Anyone who wants to be in the construction industry should have the protections that unions afford. He rallied the team together and we said, this is the direction we want to go. So for the past 6 years, we have been putting an intentional effort into place to make sure that we have racial, social, gender, every form of equity, because that's what unions represent, and that's what the Boston Building Trades unions are here to say today. So it's a pretty simple story, one that we reached out to with several of our partners and members, and they all wanted to come and talk today. And one woman on the phone last night said, I'm sorry, I can't be there. I'm working tomorrow. But she said, if you don't mind, share some of my story. And I'm going to tell just the briefest component of it on her behalf. And I think you're going to hear more of that from several folks today. But she said, grew up on Blue Hill Ave. I have 2 kids. For a long time, I tried a job that paid $8 an hour. I tried a job that paid 10 and 12 and 14, and I couldn't make ends meet. At the time, I was providing groceries for my kids on food stamps. I was living in public housing, and I was receiving Mass Health for health care coverage. And as a building trade union, we support that. If anybody in our community needs additional help, we support society, making sure they have everything in place to live a sustainable and productive and helpful and healthy lifestyle. But she said something different happened. I went to Building Pathways. I got an opportunity to work in the building trade unions, and 5 years later, I pay for my groceries in cash. I have the best health care in the country for my children and myself. I'm buying my first home, and that's the difference that unions represent, unions make. So that's one story. She went on to say that I'm fortunate, but this should not be a matter of fortune. This should be a basic standard for anyone who works in construction, and we agree, and that's what unions represent, and that's what we're here today to say. So any additional spotlight, any additional transparency, any commission that comes in and says, we want to make sure that there's standards in place and everyone has access to high standards, the unions fully support it. We were proud to support Mayor Walsh's initiative in 2017 to raise the goals for Boston residents, people of color who live here, and women in the industry. And we're proud to support things that will continue to create greater equity. So we heard from some of our panelists earlier today. We support the Boston Employment Commission and their great efforts, the Boston Residents Jobs Policy, something that's been around for a long time and is really starting to see some traction over the past few years. Heard from allies John Barrows and Travis Watson, who I think a lot of folks in this room knew before they were in their positions as community activists and advocates to make sure people had access to good jobs and good homes and health care and all the things that we should be representing as Boston, and we fully support them. So it's a pretty simple statement. As far as we're concerned, we 100% anything that the advocacy you can create and the advocacy of our elected class can create and our community partners can create that shines a greater light on the inequities in any industry, including the construction industry, the unions will support that. In addition to that, we know you do hard work. We know you understand what we represent. And if anybody would like to come by and see our training centers, our job sites, see the difference that can be made when you give workers a voice, we would love to entertain you and be hospitable to your visit. But this is a very important conversation. We're proud to be part of it, and I just want to say thank you on behalf of so many here who I think will testify later that we, as a community, need to focus on these things to create a brighter future. So thank you for the time.
Very good. Thank you, Brian. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Councilor Edwards, Councilor Flaherty, Councilor Flynn. Thank you for allowing me to sit here today and to tell you my story. Today, I'm sitting here to explain to you how important the unions are for me in my own personal journey. Being a high school graduate from a trade school myself, graduating from Lynn Tech, I had a kid in my senior year, so I knew that I needed a career, not a dead-end job. So with that being said, I had applied several times to Local 103, which then being accepted in 2006, I'm sorry, rather, into telecommunications. I then knew that I still wanted to be an electrician, so I continued to apply again. I then got accepted in 2007 into the electrical program. I was actively involved in the union. I sat on I was vice president for my first year of my apprenticeship council, and second year I was the recording secretary. With that being said, I then just continued working in the field several years later, but still becoming active, still being involved in the union. I got my license, had a kid. I have 1-year-old, I'm sorry. I had, at the time, he was 10 years old, so he would get up in the morning with me, 4 o'clock in the morning, leave the house at 5 o'clock in the morning so I could be at the job site at 6 o'clock in the morning. I was able to purchase my first home 4 years ago in Dorchester. With recognition of my tireless and effort and volunteer work at Local 103, with my business manager, Lou Antonellis, he appointed me being the first Black female for business agent for Local 103. But when I first started, I just wanted to share this. Local 103, I would oftentimes be the only female, the only person of color for the particular company that I was working for. With fast forward, about 5 years ago, I could see the difference and the change through I'd assume at the Boston City Council level with the BEC, to making sure that representation does matter. With the growth of more women, more people of color, and then with me being a business agent at Local 103 as of last year, we worked with Millennium Partners and we pushed forward our efforts to engage our local community and make sure that the community knows that Local 103 does exist. So we reached out through social media, Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, Spotify, and we let the city know that the opportunity does exist at Local 103. And I know with that effort that it just goes to show that Local 103 is committed to making sure that we are represented. And I think I went off on a tangent.
Thank you, Canal. Great story. Mary, welcome.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having us, Councilor Flaherty, Councilor Edwards, and Councilor Flynn. My name is Mary Vogel. I'm Executive Director of Building Pathways, which has been talked about a bit this afternoon, as well as a board member and treasurer of the Northeast Center for Tradeswomen's Equity. These are both nonprofit organizations that are based in Roxbury that are dedicated to increasing the participation and retention of women, people of color, and Boston residents in the building trades. I have been working with the union building trades for 35 years, first as an attorney and more recently administering various nonprofit organizations that address workers' rights. I've been with Building Pathways at its launch in 2011 and became executive director when it was created as a nonprofit in 2015. But I'm here this afternoon to talk about the breadth of the work that we do both with Building Pathways and the other organizations, our sister organizations that I'm affiliated with, both the Northeast Center for Tradeswomen's Equity and the Policy Group on Tradeswomen's Issues. As Brian said, recognizing that the construction industry was facing an aging workforce, the average age of a construction worker in Massachusetts and nationally is about 47. Mayor Walsh, who was then head of the Boston Building Trades, recognized that we had to create a better pipeline to ensure that women and people of color who were underrepresented in the industry had access and opportunities to these jobs. So in partnership with Boston Housing Authority, we created Building Pathways in 2011. Again, this is providing access and opportunities to jobs that people can can have without a college education. It's probably one of the last industries where this is true, where you can earn a good salary, benefits, retire in dignity without that college education. So through apprenticeship preparedness programs, outreach to young adults, and advocacy, Building Pathways addresses that need to recruit top talent while opening career pathways to women, people of color, and at-risk young adults. We are the only program of its kind in Boston that is directly, that was launched by the building trades and still maintains that rich partnership with all of our local unions, their apprenticeship programs, and our signatory contractors. And our training is provided free of charge and provides participants with the skills and information they need to be better prepared to enter that apprenticeship program. So since its founding, we've graduated 255 trainees in 18 training cycles. We upped our training capacity back in 2015. We have a graduation rate of over 93%, and that's going to increase with our current cycle of 19 participants. Over 86% of our participants are people of color and 42% women. And we have achieved a placement rate of over 85% in union apprenticeships and other industry-related employment. And we've placed our graduates in all of the trades and with over 60 employers, some of whom have accepted multiple placements. And although we're not specific, we don't only take Boston residents. A vast majority of our participants and graduates are Boston residents. We are now in our 19th training cycle with 19 participants who will graduate on December 13th, and you are welcome to attend that graduation and to witness with your own eyes the opportunities that Building Pathways provides. It'll be at the Sheet Metal Workers at 11 o'clock, so you're welcome to attend. As I noted, these outcomes are largely due to the rich partnerships we have established with our industry stakeholders. They are involved from the application process on to placement, and we have an advisory committee of over 20 employers. And we do that to ensure that our program satisfies their needs, as well as to share best practices for embedding diversity and inclusivity in their business operations. I want to talk a little bit about other activities that we're doing. There's been a lot of talk. Mr. Taylor mentioned at the outset the need to create a better pipeline to get Boston residents, women, and people of color into the trades. As co-founders of the Northeast Center for Trades Women's Equity with Metro BTC, the New England Regional Council of Carpenters, Mass AFL-CIO, we launched a first-of-its-kind statewide recruitment and marketing initiative called Build a Life That Works. And this is really targeting women to try to get more women into the building trades career. We've had advertising in bus shelters, on MBTA buses, fence scrims, you've probably seen it, and that advertising actually features one of our Building Pathways graduates, Savvy Man Doherty, who is now a journeywoman pipe fitter. We also host monthly Trades Women's Tuesdays in Boston. You're welcome to attend those as well. We have our next one next Tuesday. We've had over 375 women attend those open houses in Boston, and those are women who have indicated an interest in at least exploring these opportunities to get into the trades. What's great about these open houses is that we have tradeswomen that attend every one, and they share their experiences in the industry. So again, please join us next Tuesday. I have a flyer in my packet to share with you. We also engage in extensive outreach to our schools to make sure that that next generation is aware of career opportunities in the building trades. We are co-founders of the Massachusetts Girls in Trades, which is a partnership between unions, contractors, developers, industry organizations, and educational institutions, with the goal of supporting and encouraging females in career tech ed programs to continue to pursue a career in the building trades. Since its founding in 2015, we've sponsored 6 conferences and career fairs across Massachusetts for over 1,400 career tech ed students, their advisors, and industry stakeholders. And in 2016, Building Pathways launched a high school roadshow to reach students who are in non-voc schools in Greater Boston. We've reached over 1,000 students through that roadshow. And this fall, in partnership with the Boston Housing Authority and Madison Park, we launched a camp for middle school students in Boston so that they can be introduced to the trades and hopefully this will also serve as a recruitment mechanism for Madison Park. We have 15 middle school students enrolled in that program, and they're rotating through each of the 5 trades offered at the school. We actually had to turn away about 15 applicants. Our work to create a better pipeline is supported by our advocacy to promote policies and practices such as the Boston Jobs Residency Policy to promote greater demand for historically underrepresented groups in the industry. And as I noted, we are co-leaders of the Policy Group on Tradeswomen's Issues, which is comprised of over 80 partners that are dedicated to supporting the recruitment and retention of women in the industry. And Councilor Edwards, you alluded to the double or triple counting of women of color who are Boston residents, and we made a decision 9.5 years ago that that was a good thing to do because it incentivizes the hiring of women of color and Boston residents on these jobs. And it has worked. In Boston, over 50% of the hours worked by tradeswomen have been worked by women of color. We also provide technical assistance through PGTI to any stakeholder in the industry. I shared with the council our recently updated Finishing the Job Best Practices in Diverse Workforce in the Construction Industry. This is a how-to manual for any stakeholder in the industry to make sure that we're creating a diverse workforce. And we are available to make a customized presentation to the counselors, or we'll discuss that best practices manual in any venue if you're interested in knowing more about that. And then recognizing that childcare can be a barrier, particularly to the entry of women into the construction industry. We are part of we're co-founders of the Child That Works campaign, which was launched by Community Labor United to address the issue of access to quality, affordable childcare for women and families who work non-traditional hours, such as they do in our industry. That's just a snapshot of the work that we're doing day in and day out. We recognize that there is more work to be done to make sure that we're meeting the requirements of the Boston Jobs Residency Policy as well as state mandates for hiring a diverse workforce. But our collective efforts over this time have paid off. I shared with the council a Division of Apprenticeship data for the third quarter of 2018. Over 93% of all women who are in building trades apprenticeship programs are in union programs, and that's tripled since 2012. And over 90% of people of color are in union programs. Women's participation in union apprenticeship programs stands at about 8.37% versus 3.9% for non-union programs. So there is a progress to be made, but we've certainly made progress since 2012. We will continue to do this work because it's not only a moral and legal imperative, but it actually, in our industry, inures to the benefit of the bottom line. So there's a wealth of information out there, data, that shows that this makes a sound business choice. So thank you again for entertaining our comments today, and I will share some of the materials that I wasn't able to email with you.
Very good. Thank you, Mary. LaBella, welcome.
Hello, welcome. Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for having me, Councilor Flynn, Flaherty, and Edwards. My name is LaBelle Armstrong, and I currently live in Dorchester, Massachusetts, but I grew up in Roxbury, Mass. In 2012, I was a member of an all-women's class from Building Pathways, but my story is a little different. I did have a job for a very long time as a financial recruiter, but it was a contract job. That job did not offer benefits. So 6 years ago, when my daughter needed to go to college, I needed to make a decision. And that decision for me was to join Building Pathways so I can get myself into a career that would offer me benefits, retirement, pension, and my ability to put her through college. I came from a community that was poorer than poor, but now I was able to put my daughter through UMass Boston, and she graduated with a bachelor's degree in biology last year. Union jobs are very important to me. I feel like they offer opportunity for women that are single mothers to be independent, to put their kids through college, and to purchase homes even if they do not have a parent household. So I support union jobs in the city of Boston, especially for women.
Very good, thank you very much. So I have no questions of this panel, only because I know the great work that you guys are doing. Obviously, Brian, congratulations on becoming a business agent for 103, that's tremendous. And obviously, Mary on the Pathways program, and congratulations to you to finding your way to Sprinkleford 550, that's just great stuff. So, do my colleagues have any questions of this panel?
Just brief, and anyone can choose to answer. First, I want to thank you, Brian, for acknowledging the history that brought us here to this important conversation. I think to talk about how we're going to come up with solutions without realizing that there's been intentional, outright racism, sexism to exclude people for a long time that we're trying to compensate for with these wonderful programs. It's worth having that acknowledgement, so I appreciate that. In general, I'm curious, Ms. Fogel, with your programs, a lot of them are just coming online, right? And also what's great about them is they're reaching very, very down to middle school age kids. So what are your plans to track those kids and that recruitment and those touch points from those, road shows all the way to, possibly being in apprenticeship to journeyman and so on and so forth? What's your long-term tracking?
We actually, in terms of our Mass Girls and Trades initiative, we have discussed this at our last steering committee, how we're going to track the girls who are participating in those opportunities. In addition to the construction career fair, we also have an equity leadership council that many of those girls participate in. So we recognize that there's a need to track touching those girls and whether they actually go on to continue their apprenticeship. And the schools do track apprenticeship outcomes. We have to get access to that data. In terms of our own roadshow, presently we don't have the capacity to do that, but our goal in that regard is to expose children to these opportunities, because I don't think they oftentimes learn about them. They may not be in a family where there's a trade, or they just otherwise haven't heard about these opportunities. And I'd also like to say, although we recognize, we call this the other 4-year degree, going through an apprenticeship program, most of our apprenticeship programs have articulation agreements with 2- and 4-year colleges. The Painters is actually its own 2-year community college. So apprentices that go through a union apprenticeship program can actually earn college credit, and then they get tuition assistance to complete that.
Right, but just to bring you back to the data, which is where I'm trying to hone in, which is, I think a lot of that is about this. You've heard the commission testify about data, how important it is. The whole point of trying to create another commission is about data and access to that. So I would really encourage then to have a tracking mechanism to see how these touch points really, they do or don't work, because that's a concern. If a lot of these conversations are inviting the unions to talk about data. And so I would see that your program is probably a union supported, if not created by, and it's wonderful to see it, but also to see how who the girls are, where they're coming from, how they're getting in there, and how they're going about is vital to this conversation going forward. One of the other questions I have, I think, for the entire panel, whoever feels like answering it, is there an opinion at all about whether we should have a separate commission to do this or not? You heard the Beck testify that they felt that a lot of what we're asking for in this proposed ordinance is something that they either can do or are already doing it. Do you, as individuals or for your locals, have an opinion?
Thank you for the question. I think what we heard today is, I think it's important to engage in this conversation to figure out what is the best path forward. And just to clarify on the last component, so the roadshow that we put together was to touch all vocational high schools in Massachusetts to create greater awareness for careers that do great things like unions represent. But that's one of several initiatives. We're tracking that data, and we're tracking the data in all of our other initiatives too. I want you to know we are tracking that. Outcomes are very important, and we're seeing better results over the past 6 years. I think there's a long way to go, but some of that is starting and happening now, so we'd love to showcase that and show that information.
I would say that we're tracking the women that are attending our Tradeswomen Tuesdays or are going on to the Build a Life website. We are actually in the process now setting up a mechanism to track them.
That's excellent.
So whether they apply to an apprenticeship or need services to make sure that they're eligible for an apprenticeship.
And then you would also be able to see, so if they came this far, but then ultimately didn't pull the trigger, why? You'd be
Why?
able to contact them to figure out, was it babysitting, was it all these different things that you would be able to, I think that's really valuable.
That's right.
To figure out how you increase that. So it's been 255 graduates. Was
With
it-
19 next, the
with
13th.
plus 19, but
Yeah.
with the 255 in the last 11 years, so that's about 36 a year.
We are
So
now
it's
at,
since 2012. So 6 years, yeah.
6 years.
so we were doing 2 cycles per year of 15 per cycle. We're now up to 3 cycles per year of up to, well, it's usually 18. This cycle happened to have 19. We are also the training provider and assist with placement for the Mayor's Operation Exit Program, which targets formerly incarcerated young adults. So that program, I don't have statistics with me now, the city keeps those, but that's another program that that we're using to increase our pipeline.
Yeah, so what can we do to help you increase your pipeline, is my point. That's
Get the
what-
word out.
Get the word out?
I
Is that
think-
really it? That just, if we were to get the word out, there'd be more people applying and all of a sudden.
Well,
you're
I think,
or
as
is
I
it
mentioned
resource- I'm asking you about resources, money, staff, like what can the city assist you with? It's all good stuff, but it's very small considering the thousands of people in the trade. So what can we do?
The city is actually funding us currently through a grant that they received from the United States Department of Labor.
Right.
We're the largest recipient of that grant. Best Hospitality Training is a co-recipient. We also receive funding under BPDA. Funding is always an issue because these grants are not permanent.
And money's always good.
Right.
Yeah.
So the city continuing to fund our program is absolutely necessary. We are bursting at the seams in our space, so that's another issue we're looking to address as well. So, and clearly getting the word out. So, for example, the bus shelters that we're doing our advertising in, we no longer have access to those. So making those kinds of advertising opportunities available to us to make sure we can continue this marketing campaign.
Wonderful. And then finally, there were several amendments suggested about the data to be collected, either at the back, or I read some from the building trades, the building.
Trades Employers Association.
Yes. Yeah, so do any of you have any opinions about amendments about the data, the impact on the trades to provide certain data? In additional, just curious.
In terms of making sure that we understand what the union contractors are doing versus the non-union contractors, I think that's very important data to collect and make transparent.
Okay.
Putting the data online was phenomenal because, again, that supports transparency and makes our job easier in terms of determining what we need to do, where we need to focus on our pipeline.
If I can add, thank you for that, Mary. And I'd like to add also to that point, any additional advocacy helps. I think that what we're receiving from our community partners has been instrumental in increasing some of the gains we've made over the past just over half a decade. I think if we could increase all of these relationships and partnerships, we'd love to showcase them. And to the specific question, will some of those data points help in this work? Absolutely. Again, any additional transparency, access to equity opportunities, we would support them. We are fully interested in engaging a process that showcases best practices, here's more best practices, and then we start to implement them on our side of the industry. So I think we've heard the answer is yes. We would definitely support anything that leads to greater access and equity.
So, I'll take it to understand that the suggestions from the Employers Association and other folks for more data is something that you're not opposed to. How and what commission it comes under seems to be you're ambivalent or just, not taking a position on that, whether we create a new commission or not. That's kind of where I started, right?
I would say, again, I think there were several very important comments made by various stakeholders that we would definitely entertain that conversation.
Okay.
And whichever ones work, wherever we place it, I think it makes sense to do it.
All right, well, you'll be at the table, so thank you.
We appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any-
Chair recognizes
Do you guys
Councilor
want to say
Flynn.
anything?
Councilor Flynn?
Thank you, Council Flaherty. I just had a question and comment to you, Brian. For the last 10 years, I had the opportunity to work as a probation officer at Suffolk Superior Court, and I know Mary referenced it. You had a great program of giving people a second shot or a third shot with the Corey. And if it wasn't for the building trades and organized labor, a lot of these young men would not be able to have a job if it wasn't for the building trades of Boston. So I've seen personally the number of men that you helped get back on their feet into an apprenticeship program, and you practically saved their life and changed their life. I know it doesn't get reported often, but that's an incredible program that you guys run. I just want to acknowledge that and say thank you.
Thank you for that, Councilor Flynn. We were invited to a conversation a few years ago. Mayor Walsh invited us right here to City Hall and said, is there ways that we can create as many chances as folks need to get on to a career pathway that would be beneficial for them and their families? We jumped at the chance. We were proud to be a Corey-friendly industry, and we were proud that unions advocated that we had to do Corey reform to make sure that anyone who has done their time or is looking for an opportunity has that space and access and track to get there. I think you'll hear from some folks today about how that has been beneficial for them and their family. And I think it's great, and anyone that wants to add to that effort, which is another important effort, is more than welcome to join. So thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you. And my final thing, I received a letter from a good friend of mine. She works at the Chinese Progressive Association. I just wanted to highlight a couple sentences that she wrote. To ensure all residents in Boston benefit from the economic wealth of development, the jobs created from development have to help people achieve social mobility, especially those that are most vulnerable. They cannot be low-wage jobs. One of the most important functions of a commission or any commission in hearing should be ensuring that the jobs have high standards. They should be union jobs or have the same standards of union jobs in terms of pay and benefits, with a pathway to union jobs. If these jobs do not have union standards, it would not be able to serve the purpose of helping residents achieve social and economic justice. So I just wanted to say thank you to the panelists for everything that you're doing to help build this middle class in Boston.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor O'Malley. No questions at this time, so thank you to the panel.
Wonderful.
Here.
Thanks very
Appreciate it. We're going to shift to the community panel. I see my former colleague, City Councilor Chuck Turner, is here. You're more than welcome to sit in your old seat, Councilor Turner, if you want, or you can come down. But I see also a good friend, Dick Monks, is here, Wheezy Waldstein, and then I know there's two folks here from Black Economic Justice, Priscilla Flint Banks and Brother Lowe. You both want to come down, or if you? Good. Mukia Baker, come on down, Mukia. And while we're waiting for the panel to get in, if Michael McDonough, if he's still here, if he would go to that podium right there. And I also see great Bostonian Reggie Jackson, artist and photographer. Reginald Jackson, if you want to, Reggie? So if you want to grab that podium and give some comments while everyone's...
Okay, I'll give you a call.
Go ahead. You have the floor. Michael McDonough, if you just introduce yourself for the record, and you can testify as the group is coming in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the council. My name is Michael McDonough. I am the Executive Director of the Associated Subcontractors of Massachusetts, ASM. Like a lot of people who testified here today, I grew up in Dorchester, happy to say. Our association is an association of subcontractors. We have about 350 member companies representing over 40 trades. We cover all of Massachusetts, not just Boston. And we have open shop as well as union companies. Just to give you a rough sense, about 60% of our member companies are union and about 40% are non-union. When you look at an average job site, whether it's City of Boston or elsewhere, about 80 to 85% of the workers on that site are probably working for a subcontractor who's a member of ASM. We have our 350 or so members represent many thousands of workers throughout the state. We also work on private and public construction jobs. I'm fairly new myself at ASM, just been here a few months, but I'm happy to say our association, we applaud the City of Boston's efforts to increase minorities, women, and city residents of the city in the construction trades. When the ordinance was amended in 2017, our association, I know, provided some comments and feedback at that time. But overall, we support the efforts. There was some concerns about the fines that were levied, that could be levied against construction companies, even those who made good faith efforts to comply with the standards that were set forth. With regards to the current proposal, again, I'm fairly new to the association, but one of the things that I've picked up very loud and clear just a few months in is the very shortage of skilled labor and for workers in general, not just in Boston and not just for any one particular trade, but for all trades and throughout the state. And so it is very difficult for some of our member companies to have the right amount of trained and skilled workers on a job site. And so that just adds a layer of I suppose, complexity when they are making a good faith effort to comply with the standards set forth here, but at the same time, they're simply trying to find enough skilled workers to put on a job. And so to the extent that we can all work together to encourage more young folks to get into the construction trades, we believe that's a very good thing. Whether or not the commission that's being established is a separate commission or part of the BEC, I don't really have a strong feeling one way or another, but I would say that we would like to see some representation from the construction employer side, if that's possible. And with regards to the actual language in the proposal, there are, we're happy to submit some written comments with more details, but one of the things we'd like to see maybe is just a little bit more detail on what would be expected or what type of information that trade associations, specifically like ASM, might be able to provide to the city to be helpful, because that's part of, in Section 2 of the proposal, that's specifically stated that the twice-a-year meetings would take place with open shop trade associations, and since we represent union and non-union, that would be something that we would fall into. Finally, I just would say that as an association, we want to be a resource for the City of Boston. We don't necessarily track the type of data that's being discussed here today, but we do educate our members. We do serve as an avenue to drive awareness, and we see ourselves as a partner, and we'll stand ready to partner with the city to promote the requirements and do whatever we can to assist. So I thank you for the opportunity to testify here today.
Good. Well, thank you for taking the time, Mike, on behalf of ASM. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
So this is the community panel. Welcome back, Chuck. Good to see you again. Just for full disclosure, I have a hard stop at 3 o'clock, but my vice chair and my colleagues will be staying here, so just pardon my having to excuse myself at 3 o'clock, but as always, good to see you. And I will pose that question, the same question that I had posed earlier in your remarks, if you can maybe incorporate as to whether or not this proposal is duplicative of the BEC, or could they work together? We have the enforcement piece of the BEC. Should they be on parallel tracks? Should they be under the same umbrella? So, but with that, you have the floor. If you can introduce yourself for the record and any affiliation, you have the floor.
Yeah. My name is Chuck Turner. I'm coordinator of the Boston Jobs Coalition. The role that I'm playing here is to lay out the origins of the concept that led to the ordinance that you have before you, and to help us really look at what the operation of the commission would be, not only what its purpose is, but how it would have to operate in order to achieve success in relationship to the question of the recruitment and admission of Boston workers of color and women into the construction, into the companies and the unions that are doing the work. I think in all honesty, the ordinance that you have before us, before you and before us, is a ordinance that really has a collective history. That is, the ordinance really grew out of the work of the Boston Jobs Coalition in its effort to strengthen the Boston residency job policy. That is, in 2015, the coalition decided that as part of its objectives of strengthening the quality of work in Boston for Boston workers, workers of color, and women in both the permanent jobs as well as construction jobs, is that we needed to take responsibility for strengthening the BRJP, the Boston Residency Job Policy. Obviously, it's not easy to take a ordinance that's been there for 30 years with a variety of issues that people raise about it and turn it into something that people find acceptable and can get politically passed. However, if you looked at the membership in the Boston Jobs Coalition, we're a small, but we think very powerful organization. And if you look at the histories of the members in the construction area, the members of the Boston Jobs Coalition have probably collectively about 100 years of experience. And let me say that again, that the members of the coalition have approximately 100 years of experience of struggling with the development of the opportunities for Boston workers, workers of color, and women in the construction industry. The work that we were doing to strengthen the Boston residency job policy hit a strange block. And it was an emotional block, because as we were working at strengthening the BRJP, the reality came to us that we were going to be in a somewhat better position with the new ordinance, but the major problem would still be there. And the major problem has been and continues to be the fact that there are not enough Boston workers, workers of color, and women in the union sector or the open shop sector to, in fact, have the standards in compliance year after year. That is what our concern was, and what the council's concern is, and people who are concerned about a fair share in construction. The concern is to have compliance across the city, not on just one jobs or jobs in one neighborhood, but jobs, compliance in jobs in every neighborhood of the city. And Boston workers, workers of color, women having a share of all of those jobs, no matter where they are. But the reality that we had to recognize back in 2015, when we were trying to strengthen the Boston residency job policy, is that even though we thought we were going to be able to do a good job and develop a working relationship with the mayor, which in fact happened, and the ordinance was passed by the council, and we think it's a good ordinance. But what we had to recognize is that we were not focusing on the question of full compliance, because in order to have full compliance, you have to have the men and women who meet the standards. If the men and women who meet the standards are not in the unions, are not in the open shop sector, the work of Beck, the work of the BRJP will be very good, and will see to it that there are men and women who are in the unions and in the open shop sector, but it won't bring the full compliance that we all want. The only way to bring that full compliance is to, in fact, start a movement within the city of Boston that has all the neighborhoods working together to recruit their young men and young women to come together and to begin to focus on the steps to strengthen themselves, to be members of the unions, to be members of open shop companies, and in addition, to have a movement of people who say our responsibility is not just to look for our own neighborhood, not just to be concerned about what's happening in Roxbury or what's happening in Jamaica Plain, what's happening in Rosendale. We really need a movement that is going to bring people from the various neighborhoods together in order to not only identify young men and women who want to be in the trades and who are showing the capabilities of moving forward, but we have to have a relationship between leadership in all the districts who are committed to working together to, in fact, bring about the full compliance that we all need. I've been in this movement for 50 years here in Boston. The reality is that there is no legal tool that we have been able to identify, we being all the people I've worked with over the last 50 years, trying to improve the situation. There has been no legal tool that has been put forward that has, in fact, created the kind of full integration of the unions and the open shop companies with Boston workers, workers of color, and women. So there was no legal tool that we could look at. So the question was, how could we do it? And the only answer we could think about is that we need to create, as I said, a movement. Now, what would it take to create a movement around the issues of the increasing of hiring here in the city? Well, our thought was that we need to involve the city council. We need to involve the city council and the mayor in the process of building that movement. How would we involve the 13 of you and the mayor in it? Well, we said what we could do is create on paper the concept of a commission that would represent every district in Boston. And the objective of that committee would be to work together with themselves, with the unions, with the major companies that are doing open shop work here in the city, to begin to get that kind of grouping pulled together. The council's role, we said, would be to appoint, to identify the person from their district who ought to be on the commission. That is, the council has a tremendous role, not only in the enforcement, but of the standards that the ordinance that you passed set forth. But the council also has a responsibility to work together to see that the young men and women of this city, of people of color, women, are in fact moving into the industry. Now, how could you do it? We thought that the only way that was practical was to, in fact, have the ordinance say that each of the 9 district councilors would appoint a representative. The mayor would appoint 4, 1 out of his own choosing and inclination, the other 3 based on nominations by people from the community in terms of those who have worked on the issues of Boston workers, workers of color, and women. This 13-member commission would then meet twice yearly with the unions, and we initially thought about having them in the open shop non-union sector, have them, the commission, working with the associations, the trade, non-union trade associations, but we've really changed our thought. We think that what we need to do is bring to the table the large, non-union general contractors who are making money in this city. That is in the non-union sector, in terms of the commission's relationship. They ought to be meeting each year with the 15 non-union companies that have been have had the highest gross income based on Boston projects during that particular year. Question is, what happens? What do they do? Well, the ordinance is clear that they would meet twice a year, and with the unions and the non-union sector. And in the first one, there would be an open and free discussion of what have been the difficulties of your making the standards real, for the unions. And it's similar with the non-union contractors who are making money in the city, but in fact have not been meeting the standards. The reality is that the first hearing would only bring out the nature of the problem. But we had to have a second hearing where those union representatives and where the representatives of these 15 non-union open shop companies that have been making significant money in Boston would come back to the commission and say what their plan was for increasing the number of and the percentage of Boston workers of color, and women. Because if all we're doing is just talking, if all the commission is doing is just talking with the unions and the open shop contractors about the problem, that's what usually goes on. And there certainly isn't a value in just having a conversation. So there needs to be that second hearing where there's a focus on substantive plans that go forward. However, as we looked at it, we said that the commission would have to recognize that between the first and the second hearing, there would have to be discussions going on. Discussions between the unions, discussions with the open shop contractors about how they could work with the commission and the community to build those numbers. We don't think this ordinance will create some magic where the commission sits with the union representatives, union says, yes, we acknowledge that we haven't been meeting the standards, and then come back to the second meeting and say, this is how we're going to do it. It's not going to work that way. It's not real. The only way it will work is if those commission members are, in fact, talking with people in their neighborhoods about who's interested in construction, trying to begin to bring the potential applicants together, and then talking with the unions and the non-union companies about setting up a plan to bring young men and women not only from their particular district, but from all the districts. The commission members would have to be talking with each other about how do we balance it. That is that if we're each from different districts trying to get our men and women from our districts into the unions, hired by the open shop contractors, how do we do that in a way that the representative from Dorchester doesn't feel that the representative from the Rosendale Hyde Park area is trying to get a bigger share of the opportunities? That is, think about it. If we're saying that the objective is to get men and women from Boston hired in greater numbers in the unions and in the open shop companies, then there are going to be issues about which neighborhoods, in fact, are getting what percentage of the openings that are coming up. There's no magic to it. It's people learning to work together. The commission members working together so that they see themselves representing the city. The unions working with the commission to develop a plan for each of the unions that can, in fact, have the standards met fully over time, because there's been a commitment to develop a plan. Without a plan, it'll just continue to be talk. That's why we say, when you talk about the BEC taking the responsibility, I have no idea what is being discussed. Why? Because when we were revising the ordinance, one of the things we are most concerned about is how do we have enough time for the BEC to take their responsibilities in an effective way. That is, if you now have fines set up around the 7 standards, the 7 what we call regulations in the BRJP, and they have to consider recommendations for fines, in addition to talking to companies every month about the work they're doing in different neighborhoods. We were very concerned and continue to be concerned about whether the BEC in fact has the capacity to do that. The idea that the BEC would have the capacity not only to do that enforcement role, but now to begin to talk to leadership in all the neighborhoods about who's out there who could be encouraged to come to a process of going into the industry. The BEC doesn't have the time to do that. The BEC doesn't have time to set up 4 hearings a year to talk with the unions, and then to talk with the open shop contractors, and then to work with them between those hearings so that they really can come up with a plan. I think you have to admit that when you think about it, the BEC can't do it. And there's no other aspect of government that you want to put that responsibility into, because I think the commission should represent the people of the city. That is, that they should be individuals who are nominated, placed by the council, but really are a neighborhood-based fabric to build this plan. That's why we think the idea of having the BEC or any other governmental entity, it just isn't practical. It won't work, and we shouldn't go down another path that doesn't produce result. Last comment, so my other colleagues can share their perspectives that led to the development of this, of the commission, is that the other advantage that we really need to think about is that this commission could not only do a tremendous job in terms of organizing the movement of Boston workers, workers of color, and women into the construction trades, but could also encourage the development of strategies and perhaps ordinances that apply these same principles to permanent jobs, that begin to focus on the issue of how do we make sure that Boston workers, people of color, and women are getting a fair share of the permanent jobs, because the reality is that it's not happening for permanent workers. It probably is less effective compliance, if you want to use that term, for permanent workers in the city than with the construction industries. But we can't move into the focus on a permanent sector until we really have done the job in relationship to construction. And that's why we think the commission is really a vehicle not only to help the construction sector, but to inspire people to think about how do we bring the change to the permanent job sector that has the same kinds of problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck, for your opening as well as for your response. I appreciate the answer. I'll give that some thought. And no disrespect to you or to this panel, I have to excuse myself just to make an appointment. That said, the vice chair of the committee, my colleague, City Council Lydia Edwards, is now going to stand in as the chair, and I'll review the tapes. I know obviously this panel very well. Talking about everyone having a personal responsibility. You have a responsibility, I have a responsibility, folks in this room have a responsibility to bring and introduce men and women to the trades. Tony Richards, the gentleman that spoke earlier in the hearing, probably does it better than anybody, just built on relationships. He's bringing men and women from the community over into the electricians union, the plumbers union, the iron workers. That's what we all need to do. Anyone that's in a trade, introduce your niece, your nephew, your cousin. Talk about like sort of the Irish's relationship with the unions. It was, you know, bringing their son along or bringing their nephew along or their niece or their daughter, and that's the effort that's going to require, because at the end of the day, the census of both union and non-union can't accommodate the 51-40-12. It's just not how they're wired right now, and hopefully as the apprenticeship program moves forward and we're able to plug in more men and women into the trades, that would be huge. But there's also another factor. It's a kid from Southie, kid from Roxbury that's working in the trades, making a good living, and then because they can't find a parking spot at night, because they didn't get the school of choice for their child, because they want a driveway, they want an in-ground pool, you know, they go to Milton, they go to Randolph, they go to Canton, and so we lose a lot of their city kids, born and raised in the city, educated in the city. They're in the trades, they get a great job, they start to make some dough, and they start to make decisions based on, you know, what's in their best interest. And when they come home from work and they can't find a parking spot, believe it or not, we lose a lot of those men and women to the suburban communities. And again, so that census data within the unions and even the non-unions, it's constantly changing. And we need to do a better job at least keeping up with it. So I appreciate your comments. And we also accommodated the schedule around the community's concerns, as well as working with our friends in labor to try to get this in before the council session adjourns for the year. So I appreciate you allowing that, and want to make sure that I'll review the tape and we'll get back soon. Thank you. Good to see you, Chuck. Happy holidays, everybody.
Same to you. Who's ever's next?
The chair, Priscilla, can you start?
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Thank you, City Council Lydia, for holding this hearing, and I want to thank the other city councils that were here and had to leave. My name is Priscilla Flint Banks. I am the co-founder of the Black Economic Justice Institute. I am also the chair of the Boston Jobs Coalition, as well as the co-chair of the Blue Hill Corridor Planning Commission. And we were here 2 months ago talking similar about the same situation, only now it's about the Economic Council. So before I start my testimony, I just want to say, the other people that testified, they talked about the union being good for our community and our people, and it's true. It is a good. The problem is that the unions are not that inclusive of brown and black people and people and females. So that is one of the issues for the Economic Council. So for the past 6 years, the Black Economic Justice has been fighting for good jobs in our community, construction and permanent jobs. We've led and joined protests in Roxbury, Jamaica Plain, South End, East Boston, Chinatown. We've made the community aware of non-compliance of the Boston resident jobs and collected signatures to get good job standards. We helped rewrite the BIJP new ordinance, and we are continuing to work with the BIJP office and the BEC Commission to ensure that it is enforced. We have been monitoring several construction work sites in Roxbury for the past 6 years. We know the needs of our community, and we are here today because of those needs. We're working together to ensure people from our community are on these job sites. We attend the BEC meetings and hear the excuses that come from the developers and contractors about why they are not in compliance. We attend the BEC meetings and see half of the commissioners don't show up. We see that there are not enough monitors for the projects that are being done. We see major construction going on, yet a lot of our people are not on these jobs. In the year 2018, it is sad that the construction industry is still predominantly an all-white male industry and is controlled mostly by the unions. We feel like the unions should be accountable to the city of Boston as they bring in mostly all-white males. Some of the unions are changing the way they operate and are bringing people of color women, and Boston residents, but some are still stuck in the 18 and 1900s. I am here today to ask you to adopt the Economic Justice Commission so we may be able to break this continuing cycle of Black and brown residents being left out. Boston should be embarrassed to be the most gentrifying city in the country. Boston should be embarrassed to be named the most racist city in the country. Boston should be embarrassed to know as the city, in this city, where white people assets are $247,500 and black people are $8. There is something seriously wrong with that picture, and changes need to be made. You as city councilors, we hope that you can make that, help us make that change. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Priscilla, Brother Lowe.
Good afternoon. My name is Mukia Baker Gomez, and I have over 35 years' experience working in contract compliance and civil rights, both at the city and the state level. And I want to be able to be specific about what I'm going to be recommending to the councilors. Yeah. You asked Mary from Building Pathways, what could the council do? And I think Chuck spoke to a lot of it. Yeah. And my response to you would have been if every single councilor just hosted an information session twice a year in your district, you would be alerting a lot of your constituents about the resources that are available for access to employment. I think that would be critically important. But I want to talk about the public construction law in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts because it relates to every municipality, no matter where you sit in the Commonwealth. The public construction law was authored by both Mayor Walsh when he was state representative and State Senator Diane Wilkerson. In that public construction law, it talks about compliance with prevailing wage. It talks about compliance with apprenticeship programs. It talks about contractor fines and sanctions for being in noncompliance. And what I think is critically important for the council to be able to see is the patterns and practices of those contractors that have done work with the city. Who are some of the biggest felons? And are they still acquiring work with the city? The Inspector General's Office of the Commonwealth can be extremely helpful in helping the city to frame its program so that you can protect yourself at every level possible. But more importantly, we have worked probably over the last 25 years in terms of encouraging young people of color in particular to consider the trades. So when the earlier panel was talking about when the city's representatives were talking about the trades, I never heard them say elevator operators. There were certain trades they never mentioned because those trades have been in constant non-compliance in terms of reaching out and recruiting people of color and women to be educated in the trade. So first, I would strongly recommend that you look at those trades that have had the most difficulty in terms of complying. And then what are those locals or local unions or those local employers doing to be able to accommodate the standards that they're required to adhere to? I also want to encourage you, one of the things that was taught to me when I was working for the Commonwealth, I was working with this phenomenal gentleman who knew everything about construction, and he told me every time you see a crane, that equals 150 tradespeople. I mean, I can't imagine. So now I walk through the city and I count cranes because that's the number of jobs that are available. And when I look at the different sites throughout the city where work is being done, I think to myself, well, then where are all those people that they recruited and trained? How come they're not on these jobs? And then the secondary question is, of course, about core crews. How many of these employers are actually hiring minorities and women and Boston residents to be a part of their core crew? If you're a Boston-based company, that should never be an issue, in my opinion. You should always be looking for local labor skills so that your employees don't have to travel far, you don't have to hear excuses about why they can't get to work on time. But it also encourages the economic base and builds it in a way that benefits everybody, even the contractors. So we're building a base of Boston residents that can contribute much more positively to the tax base in this city, which would identify even more opportunities for minorities and women to be employed. But I also heard from the panel that Brian Doherty was on that they're looking for more resources. And I think one of the resources, I mean, it was great that he was saying that the city was providing some assistance, but I think one of the best resources you have is your CDBG fund. If you were able to leverage that so that the unions could establish more apprenticeship programs, or their partnerships with the local educational institutions could be enhanced, or there were more advantages at your neighborhood level to be able to partner with neighborhood organizations to provide that information flow, I think it would be absolutely worth the money. On that note, I thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to use the microphone. I need this. So my name is Weezy Waldstein. I'm with Action for Equity. I'm the Jobs Equity Coordinator there. I'm also a steering committee member of Boston Jobs Coalition. I want to thank the council. I want to thank the city. I particularly want to thank Councilor Janey and Councilor O'Malley, who lead and support the monitoring in local neighborhoods that I've done some of my learning through participating in. I sit on two neighborhood monitoring committees, the Roxbury monitoring that happens, that is convened jointly by Councilor Janey and the Roxbury Strategic Master Plan Oversight Committee, and also the JP Rocks monitoring that is part of the voted JP Rocks plan voted by the BPDA that Councilor O'Malley supports. So in the places where I've been doing monitoring for many years now, the work is heavily open shop. And what we've seen is that as residential construction has expanded in the city, that open shop construction has really been expanding in the city. And this is, I don't myself know the numbers. I've been asking, and I've been told by folks who know the numbers that this is expanding. And so I want to direct my comments to the non-union sector because I think it's a significant number of jobs. My only comment about the union, access to the union jobs, we all agree the union jobs are great. This is really what we want for people's future. And there's been improvements. But we also know there's a ways to go since the overall residence numbers, as just one example, is in the 30% where it should be 50%. I just know that people frequently say, oh, if we have an apprentice program, we'll make it 50% residents. But you're not going to get transformative change if you just are waiting for everybody to retire and you just reach for your apprentices the same number that you want for your whole workforce. So I just think that we have to open the conversation of doing whole apprentice classes that are all residents, people of color, and women, and really think about transformative approaches. I want to go back to the question of the open shop sites because we sit there every 2 weeks. So every week, essentially, I'm sitting with general contractors and contractors, most of whom in this setting, the settings I'm in, are open shop and non-union. BRJP has procedural requirements that seeks out workers in this varying demographic categories to meet the goals at a single site. And those procedures are very different if you're union or not union. And so to understand even how to implement the BRJP, we have to look at what the open shop subcontractors are expected to do to find people. Nobody's meeting their goals. And week after week, what we hear the contractors saying to us directly when they come in, and also the general contractors reporting on what their subs say to them, I can't find people, I don't know how to look, where to look, I don't know how to find them. I put the sign up on my site, apply here, the walk-in list. I don't get many. I'm only here for a short term. I'm an out-of-town contractor. I only need people at the site intermittently. In town, I don't have the channels. I don't know where to advertise. When I advertise, I don't get results. I need people that are already skilled.
I don't have a big crew on the site. I don't really have anyone on the site who can be training new people. Even the contractors, we've just met recently with a contractor that has 4 or even maybe 5 sites in Boston, a non-union GC, where one site was doing some innovative things but had no plan to share that internally inside the company about how, and no sharing of people, so that when they got laid off at one site, there was no looking at the other sites to see if there was space and a need for that particular demographic there. We've met with subcontractors in specific trades who have internal training programs, some of the bigger ones, but they didn't have a strategic plan to identify and train people who met the BRJP standards. They don't think of that as something they need to do to compete in Boston. We know we have a mix of a number of problems: how skills get built, the fragmented character of work at each site, which is a very difficult problem operationally, and how Boston residents, people of color, and women get into the pipeline, which is a different question than just how skills get built. It's how this sets of people get in. This isn't news. Figuring out how it applies to the non-union sector is new, however, and this commission could help unpack that. And so I want to really look at the ways that the Economic Justice Commission is an opportunity to make sense of what needs to be done. We really need to break out union and non-union data by trade and sub-trade. So there's about 22. By the time you break out, the different parts of different trades, there's about 22, maybe 23 trades, and then break it out by union and non-union. We need to learn more about how the larger non-union subcontractors with multiple sites in Boston coordinate their hiring and training and moving people around internally. Or do they really, in spite of having all this need for labor, it's just at one site because they have a need, because of the numbers, because of BRJP that day, that person comes in and goes out and never makes it to their core crew. We've got to identify trade-specific training needs. These contractors do not have a robust training capacity. The trades performs a tremendous service. I mean, it's very, very real. This non-union sector has to be either pushed to, if pushing them on these demographics and meeting these skill needs is pushing them to be better and maybe pushing them to join up with the union sector and have these needs met. But in the meantime, we can't walk away from it because I do think it's growing. How do they do job posting and information on hiring needs? How do they even, these guys come in, these contractors come in, and they go, I got no clue. I'm from Wenham. I got nothing. I know no way of finding people that meet these categories. So too bad. And they literally, they're like apologetic and useless. We need to clarify the requirements for contractors searching for people in the non-union segment. It is very clear how a contractor documents that they have looked for a union tradesperson. There is no standard that I know of, no expectation of how a contractor proves they've been out looking in the non-union segment. And finally, I do think this will open the discussion of how non-union subcontractors invest in skill development. Union contractors are making a major economic financial contribution to skill development of union members. The non-union guys don't make any contribution to it in most situations. And it's not only an uneven playing field, but it means there is, in fact, no way for people to enter that field and have a skill development pathway on the open shop, on the non-union side. And so we have to open that conversation with them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Dick Monks. I'm a member of City Life Vita Urbana and the City Life representative on the Boston Jobs Coalition Steering Committee. I'm going to try to make this fairly short and not necessarily echo, but I do want to say that I would echo what I've heard today from our panel in terms of how they're addressing the issue. I think it's become clearer as the discussion goes on, and I actually appreciate that the question Councilor Flaherty asked early was, do we need another commission? And I think that what's happened throughout this whole afternoon is we've come up with the answer that we do. This is a very complicated and not a simple solution, figuring out how we're going to move forward with compliance in construction. I think what we've heard about the unions that are represented here today, who have spoken today, the training programs that have spoken today, it's definitely a major step forward. It's definitely been a plus for people getting access and availability to union jobs. Myself, I'm a 40-year retired member of the Operating Engineers, Local 877, proud of it. But in and of itself, I'm not sure, as has been said, that's going to meet the goal unless we can come up with expanding those programs, adding to those programs, or maybe challenging the unions to look at people who have years of experience, people of color in this city who have as Brother Doherty has talked about, somewhat been excluded from the availability of these union jobs and are now in their 30s and their 40s and 50s and are skilled. And now are being overlooked because they're not really in a situation where they can go into an apprentice program, but maybe there's a way of unions taking them in. You know, the training is crucially important. I don't want to shortchange the training and the need for that. But I think the commission, for instance, could attack that question. I think the commission is not just going to be a data collection, which is important, but it really has to have some hard questions asked and answered. You know, if we're taking a handful of apprentices every year into one union and another union, it's not going to solve the problem. And so I'm glad that we're starting to solve the problem or trying to look at it. I think it's an encouraging start. I'm proud to be a member of the Boston Jobs Coalition as we keep bringing these issues forward, and I look forward to, from here on out, I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Reggie Jackson. Any of you who thought Reggie Jackson, the ball player, was going to be here this afternoon, I'm sorry to disappoint you. My background has been in the education sector. I've taught for over 30 years in higher education, and I'm also a visual artist, currently an African-American master artist at Northeastern. And when I saw the announcement for this hearing, I felt initially that I didn't really have any direct, insightful testimony to make. And then as I began to think more and more about my experience as a community worker, as at one point president of the United Neighbors of Lower Roxbury and the Roxbury Neighborhood Council and the Oversight Committee and these various committees involved in the Lower Roxbury, I began to realize that there probably is a perspective that I could speak from that might be insightful. My thinking about all of this really stems from the need to talk about the urgency of this matter. We find ourselves in this time, 2018, where we recognize that there's a gross disparity in terms of net worth of African Americans and women. I mean, it's just astounding. I've just recently came back from a 3-month stay in West Africa, and I just asked, some of my colleagues there, what do you think, is the what would you think in terms of the economic worth of an African American in Boston, Massachusetts, in the United States, in 2018, compared to their white counterparts? And everybody that I spoke to was floored. They just couldn't get their heads or wrap their heads around this finding that the Federal Reserve study presented. 240, close to $250,000 as opposed to $8. And so I began to try to think about, well, what is that about? It's about an institutionalized system that makes it totally impossible for a segment of the society to create and maintain wealth, and how that perpetuates itself over time. And so that's really my contribution today, to talk about the urgency of this matter. It's on the surface about fair treatment, but it's also has to do with the economic justice of all of this. And how can we continue in 2018 to talk about continued dialogue when action is necessary, when plans need to be put in place that really speak to moving things forward in a very dramatic way. The system that we have is often thought of as not as being flawed, but it is a system, and somehow or other we need to get around some of the stopgaps that are inherent in the system, and find our way into some kind of reasonable, intelligent, practical series of actions that will change this gross dichotomy that exists. But that's pretty much, I thought I should come as an artist and as someone who has been affected by all of this. I live in Lower Roxbury. I see the cranes, and I too wonder, where are folks? And I see the developments all over the city. And how could a place like Boston, that is just booming, continue to be in a shameful, sorry state that we find ourselves in? Thank you.
Thank you. Just very briefly, I wanted to thank you all for your testimony and to specifically point out parts that I felt was very informative. Weezy, I really appreciated your analysis of what we're not getting from non-union shops, and how not only are we not getting that information, but how by virtue of their setup, it's hard to get that information, and how this commission or that in general, the conversation needs to involve them, and specifically getting them at least on parity with the information that unions are already providing. Because you're right, they are very much operating, and a huge amount of the projects are non-union or open shop, if you will. And so if we're not getting data from them, then we're missing half the story. I want to thank you, Priscilla, for your testimony, specifically also for your dedication, and just I want to acknowledge the amount of work for years that you have done, highlighting whether it was popular or not, that we have a problem here, whether people want to hear it or not, and that you have been there on the front lines. And I wanted to acknowledge your testimony before, where you specifically talked about the city partnering, and this also would dovetail with your testimony, Mukia, specifically about what the city could do. Priscilla had brought up how the city could help support some of the monitoring and monitors who are oftentimes working a full-time job, sometimes two full-time jobs, and then coming around and monitoring on the job sites to make sure other people are able to work as well. So how the city could do that, fund that. Also, that I see this as an opportunity to talk to some of the unions and talk to some of the other folks as well about how that could also be a monitoring system, could be supported. And I wanted to really address some of the comments, and I want to be very clear from my stance, and I'm sure Councilor Flynn would also echo this. Being critical of unions is one thing. I do not at all criticize, nor do I want this conversation to be criticizing the concept of unions and organized labor. That I firmly support and stand by and believe in wholeheartedly. Member of UAW myself. And I think you did make that distinction, Priscilla, but I wanted to echo this, that this conversation is not a criticism of organized labor, but it is acknowledging that within the organizing of labor and within the certain locals that we have here, we do have a problem. And I believe that the locals are here to express that they agree, that they are here to say that they are very conscious of that as well. So I think I just wanted to make sure that on the record for myself to say that. I really do appreciate your perspective as an artist and as someone who's living with the struggle continually, and then also seeing how the rest of the world is viewing our struggle is very important. We can become very insular in how we see things. I want to just ask this one question. I understand from everyone here that there is a support for the commission, a separate commission, as opposed to blending in with the BEC. The question that I've gotten from folks, and I think we'll continue to get from folks, is, so now we have this commission, okay? Commission's established, everything's ready to go, we have standards, we've come up with regulations, we've come up with ways and additional data points that we want. And if no one comes, and if no one presents the reports, my biggest concern is that we will replicate what we have right now with the pilot program, which is the payment in lieu of taxes with universities, where they're required to present reports to the city, where they're required to at least explain where their community benefits are, and they don't. And they don't. And they continue to not, there's no enforcement mechanism against them. There's no way to force them to do that. So what you will find, I'm concerned, what you will find is that the good actors, the ones who want to be a part of the solution, will come to the table. But the very folks who we want to get here, whether they're union or not union, there's nothing in this version right now that would require them to come to the table. And whereas with the BEC, there's 7 points and criteria where they can start to lose money if they do not comply with the BEC. So that's the question is of enforcement. All of this is great, like you've mentioned, all the paper stuff is great. But if no one has to come, if there's no stick to push them to come, how do you make sure that this happens?
You are not, based on my experience over the years and discussions with lawyers about, isn't there a way that we can get the unions to at least tell us how many workers of color they have?
They do and are, but I think the point in the BEC is that if the payrolls aren't provided, for example, if there's certain data points that aren't provided by union or non-union shops on the city contracts, there's an enforcement mechanism. You get punished for it if you don't do it. And my concern is that there are unions who are going to just go ahead and provide this data, who are committed to this, who want to do this. How will this separate commission require them to do it? If they don't do it, what happens?
Well, the question is, what do we do? City council, community activists, concerned residents, do if we see that there are non-union open shop companies that are making millions of dollars each year in Boston, and then they won't even come to a request from a commission established by the council. I think there are a number of creative ways we could begin to convince those companies that it is in their interest to come. There are ways. The BEC does have the power to focus on companies that are showing that they don't have concern for the policies. If they aren't coming to these hearings of the commission, I think that's a clear indication that they are not interested in the interests of the people of the city. In terms of the unions, harder question, but the question is, what do the unions that are trying to move forward do with their fellow union members who are saying, I don't have to pay any attention to that? What does the mayor do? The mayor provides a tremendous support for the unions in Boston. If we find that there are some unions that are not, do not feel that it's in their interest to even dialogue with a body that's been set up by the council and the mayor, then the question, I think, for the mayor and council is, are there benefits that these unions are getting in somewhere from Boston? I know the union, the program that Ms. Vogel was discussing is getting, Building Pathways, is getting monies from the city. Are there other union programs that are getting monies from the city? If those unions aren't coming to these meetings, then they shouldn't be allowed to continue to get the benefits. See, I think you're saying, where is the law in this ordinance that can really put the hammer down if they're not meeting? I'm suggesting that it's time for us to begin to understand our collective power if we decide to use it, and not just say, let's look what the words say that we can do. No, let's look at what we need to do together if there are unions or non-union contractors who aren't showing the respect. I think what we do is we show them that we don't want them in Boston if, in fact, they don't want to cooperate with us.
Thank you. Thank you. Councilor Flynn?
The only thing I'd like to say is I want to thank the panel for being here, but more importantly, thank you for so many years of dedicated service to helping people in our city, treating people fairly and treating people with respect and dignity. So I thank you for your testimony, and you know, we appreciate everything that you've said tonight and appreciate everything you've done for our city for so many years.
Okay. We certainly thank the council and look forward to continuing to work on these issues. I think we've made a good start this year in a number of ways, but good starts don't get us to the end if we don't do that work. I would like to just point out that there are a number of organizational people who couldn't come, but they said that they were going to be sending testimony. Joe Kriegsberg, director of the Massachusetts Association of CDCs, Karen Chen, director of the Chinese Progressive Association, Gail Lattimore, director of the Codman Square Community Development Corporation, Kathy Brown, director of the Boston Tenant Coalition, and Don Carlson, who is an active member of the BJC, and also was the author of the economic section of the NWAC report on city economic activities. I read them just to say that there are people who aren't here today, but who are supporting the ordinance, and you will have, if you don't already have, written information from them.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So at this point, we're going to move to public testimony. And I know some folks have already left, but I'm going to call out the names of individuals who marked that they wanted to testify, just to at least acknowledge that they were here and signed in. I have Johnny McInnes from the Boston Teachers Union. I don't know if Johnny's still here. So I'm going to call out four names and then have you each stand at the microphones. I have Phil Reason. Is Phil still here? From Philip Randolph. Is Phil still here? Okay. Zuhar Nachauda from Local 26. And then Clifton Sims, who's a Roxbury resident. Okay. Johnny?
All right. Greetings, Councilor Flynn, Councilor Edwards. My name is Johnny McInnes. I am a board member for the A. Philip Randolph Institute and also the political director for the Boston Teachers Union. And the Boston Teachers Union supports a diversified workforce. We support a workforce in the building trades that is diversified with Boston residents, women, and workers of color. We support construction trades and labor where individuals can support their family with access to competitive pay, health care, and opportunities for advancement working in a career path. Within the Boston Public Schools, we have a vocational education school known as Madison Park High. The building trades are working on consistent, sustained partnerships as an expectation to provide opportunities for students in voc ed. Not only at Madison Park, but other BPS high school students who reside in Boston should have access as well. Students who graduate from school should be able to go through union apprenticeship programs, gaining in the construction trades, creating more equitable opportunities with the skills they learn. Consequently, those students who graduate are not only residents of Boston, but of color and women. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So if Phil's not here, I'm just going to do Phil one more time. Zohair? Zohair, sorry.
Good afternoon, councilors. My name is Zohair. In Judah, I work at Taj Boston Hotel, and also I work with Local 26. I'm here just to speak in favor of this ordinance on behalf of our members, like over 10,000 workers of Local 26. I also would like to thank Mayor Walsh, also the City Council, and the sponsors of this ordinance, the trade unions also, the trade unions. So Local 26 and the Building Pathways work together on forming and helping people from neighborhoods around Boston here to get jobs, get better jobs. We work together, like we have learning centers, BEST, and in Roxbury also we have students like all year. Also, hotel workers stand with construction workers. We see just to make sure that wealth goes back to where it should be with people who needs it in the neighborhoods of Boston. In my experience as a worker at the Taj, the only way to build this wealth is with union cards, and that is Boston. That is what Boston building trade unions provide, and that is what we need to see more of. This ordinance being processed can only further building pathways and organized labor goals, compliance with the standards established by Mayor Walsh in 2017, can only bring more good on union jobs to Dorchester, Roxbury, and Mattapan. For that reason, Local 26 is in full support of this ordinance, and I thank you. I thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I called out Clifton Sims. I didn't. Please.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Clifton Sims. I'm a longtime Boston resident, and I'm here in support of the Roxbury community. I was born and raised in Roxbury, Blue Hill and Quincy, Grove Hall, Humboldt, Uplands Corner area. I currently reside at the Hyde Park area of Roxbury, only because I was involved in the City of Boston first-time homeowners program. Otherwise, I couldn't afford to even live in the city. I'm the treasurer of the group called the Mass Alliance of HUD Tenants, where we work with at-risk units who are going to lose their affordability due to management coming in to turn over the market rate, also the condominiums. We also work to unionize the people in these buildings to save their housing so they'll end up on the street. Also, I want to point out that a lot of the developers who come in and turn these buildings around, they don't reinvest in the communities. They don't put people to work that live in the communities. And once the housing stock leaves, it's lost forever. And also, there's nothing in place to make these developers fund things going forward. Excuse me, I'm very nervous. Also, I'm the former treasurer of a group called Haymarket People's Fund, where we support social service organizations, a lot of times kids who are at risk with gang violence, immigration reform, and at-risk children who could benefit from working in buildings, working in the construction unions, working in construction in general. I also want to point out that I've had the same job for 32 years. I make a living wage, but the wage I make, I could not even afford to be in the city of Boston. I know I'm kind of rambling, but. So I want to point out, growing up in the city of Boston, I remember as a kid with my grandfather seeing construction going on, and even back then, noticing no people of color working these buildings. As I was growing up, I noticed the same thing. You know, to see a black man on a job site, he either had a broom or cleaning bricks. It was a rare sight. It was like a unicorn. So I think we have to get away from that. You know, a kid growing up, I didn't know black kids did construction. I know it's naive now to say, but it appeared that black children or black kids in general weren't qualified to do these things because they were just not there. So, we need to, do something about that. And I'm sorry I was nervous, but thank you.
No, you did fine. Thank you very much. I have Luther Pickney, Roxana Rivera, Nicola Prince. Is Nicola here? Corey Allen? Corey Allen? Okay. Becky Pierce? Didn't get a. So 1, 2, 3. And then I also have, I cannot read this name. Some local 4 operators. I can't read it. Darrell? D-A, and then some scribble. I can't read this. Darnell? Something, the email ends in @comcast.net. I cannot read this name. Local 4, if someone from Local 4 then wants to come, that'll be the next 4 people to speak. I can't read it, I'm sorry. Oh, yes, oh, sorry. And since we're, we started about 1:30 and we're pushing on 4 o'clock already, if we can keep testimony to about 2 minutes and hit the highlights. Again, anything you want to also add to us or to criticize or express your concerns, you can do so in writing. It becomes also part of the official record as well. You can also contact any of us individual city councilors. Please.
Good afternoon. Thank you, councilors, for allowing us to speak. I'm here today representing Best Hospitality Training Center, which is a 501c. We do training for the hospitality industry, which, along with Building Pathways, we share an office with them in Dudley. We work with them day to day. My desk is less than 5 feet from Andrew, who does a lot of the recruitment for them. We and I see the work that they're doing. And, my prepared speech isn't as necessary as before. We all know it's a good thing. We all know we're in favor of it. I do agree with Councilor Edwards. We do need to make sure that the ordinance comes with some teeth so that we can, follow through on some of the threats and so forth when we do have these problems in the city. Programs like Building Pathways works. Okay. It's amazing. Building programs like BEST work. We need to get the word out. You asked earlier what you can do, the city can do. Really just promoting these type of programs are essential. The work that they're doing at Madison Park and the work that we want to do with Madison Park is essential. Programs and the ordinance like this is essential to make Boston a fairer city. You have people who grew up in the city who can't cement roots, and that's just not right. We deserve to be able to live in the community in which we grew up in, the community that we represent. And this ordinance, the work that the local unions are doing that. So I commend the city council and the mayor for this ordinance and just say, yes, please do it as soon as possible and give them some teeth.
Thank you. I'm going to just call Nicola one more time. Nicola? Okay. And then Corey? Do we have Corey? Okay. All right, Becky?
Hi, everybody, and thanks for holding and participating in this hearing. My name is Becky Pierce, and I live in Codman Square in Dorchester. where I've lived for nearly all my adult life. I am a mostly retired self-employed carpenter, and I'm here to support the creation of an Economic Justice Commission because housing displacement in my neighborhood is at a crisis level. The median household income in Codman Square is a little over $37,000, which means an affordable rent is $930. But rents in the neighborhood, and most of the neighborhoods in Boston, are at least $1,500 to $2,000, and as high as $3,000 or more in the new developments. The city just approved a development 2 blocks from my house to tear down a church and put up a 40-unit building. And 5 of the units will be reserved for families earning $70,000 or less. But there won't be any units for people making the median income of $37,000 in my neighborhood. So people can't afford to stay here because they're not getting good paying jobs. And the construction jobs that are created down the street at this development and all over the city, where there's construction everywhere, as we've all been saying, they pay well. They pay enough for people to be able to afford to pay Boston rents and stay in Boston. So I think that many more of the jobs that are created that are on these construction projects should be going to women and people of color who live in Boston. Unions and non-union employers need to recruit many more Boston residents, people of color, and women into their apprentice and other training programs. So the proposed Commission for Economic Justice will help ensure that people in Boston get the training and good jobs they need to be able to stay here. Thank you for supporting this ordinance.
Thank you. Roxana, did you want to say anything? Please. Thank you.
Good afternoon. So my name is Roxana Rivera. I'm the Vice President of the Service Employees International Union, Local 32BJ. I'm here to speak in support of the ordinance to increase the opportunities in the pathway for increasing diversity and equity. Our union is a union of 19,000 workers that largely immigrant and people of color that work in the contracted out industry. I know too well how the goal of good jobs can be treated in a dismissive way by non-union employers, especially in the contract out industry, because of the person's color of their skin or the language that they speak. And so as you as a city council continue to work through this issue, I want to urge that the issue of good jobs be encouraged with the goal of increasing diversity and not be seen as mutually exclusive, right, but that they go hand in hand. A key issue should be good jobs, and non-union contractors need to be encouraged to both deal with the issue of diversity, but to also lift the standards of employment that they offer so that people have an opportunity for a good union job. Because at the end of the day, we don't want to see workers being seen or treated at a construction job site as simply a day laborer. Right? We want them to be seen as a person that has an opportunity for a real apprenticeship path that can lead to a long-term, stable, good union job. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to echo, in the prior BEC hearing that we had, which is going to continue, every April and every October we're required to actually have the BEC come in and give reports. And one of the things we asked them to start to monitor were bad actors in terms of payment. We found that they were not necessarily talking to the folks in workforce development. I know that there's a whole filing of claims if someone hasn't paid their workers. And I said, along with checking who you're hiring, if they're not paying people, or worst-case scenario, or even a bad-case scenario, if they hire people of color and then continually don't pay them, but meet the Boston resident jobs policy so that they can literally not pay people of color and women a fair wage, then we also need to monitor that as well. We don't want them to be given contracts or be given a pass on that either. So it's the combining of the two I completely agree with. And I don't know, did Local 4 produce somebody for this person? Okay. Sorry, can please state your name?
How you doing? My name is Johnny McCullough Lynch, and I'm a proud member of Local 4. I'm in the second year of my apprenticeship, and so far in my apprenticeship, I've learned to become not just a better operator, but also a better worker and a better co-worker as well. I've learned the value of teamwork, and I've become selfless and not just looking out for myself and looking out for myself and, you know, just nobody else, but I feel like I've become aware of other people that want to go home as well in safety and the whole deal. Without Local 4, I wouldn't have learned that, right? So I'm thankful for Local 4 for having me come in and you know, and choosing me to be an apprentice and learning as much as I can from them and all the operators that have helped me along the way so far. The union's changed my life in ways I can't really explain right now because I'm still going through the process. So it's kind of hard for me to quantify exactly as to what it's done because I'm still going through. And, you know, when I graduate, that's when I'll know how it's changed my life. Yeah, I think everyone should have access to a union career. I'm also here today because Boston needs more careers in the union trades, and I'm thankful for this opportunity that I've been granted. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. The next four, I have Devin Fahey, Naomi Kelsey, Toya Chester, Nathan Santos. Did I call your name? Come forward. If I called your name, come forward to testify. I have Devin. Are you Devin?
Yep, Devin right here.
And
How you
then
doing?
is Naomi here? Yes? Okay, great. And then Toya? Is Toya here? She left, okay. So to call up one more person, then Alex Ramisi? Is Alex here? Left? Zach Diayoka? Any chance from Local 4? Okay, great. Thank you. Looks like Local 4 signed up. You guys want to? Well, I have a couple 103s too. A couple 103s in here too. Devin, please.
How you doing? My name's Devin Foy. I'm from Dorchester. I am also in Local 4. I'm a proud member of Local 4. Proud member of Local 4. The union has changed my ways. My life in a lot of ways I can't explain. I always wanted to be always wanted to be an operator ever since I was little. So having the chance and the opportunity to actually get in the program and learn the roots and the ways of operating engineer, I'm very proud to be. And what's the thing that's hard on a lot of children is schools do not push trades like they should. They always push college on kids, and college is not for everybody. And it's good that the trades are out there, like building pathways of showing kids and telling them that there's different routes to go, and you can have a great career in all the trades that you work. And you have a better life and be able to support your family and do something that you actually love.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Naomi?
Hello, hi. My name is Naomi LaPlanche. I'm from Dorchester.
I'm going to speak directly into
I'm
the
sorry.
mic. Yep.
Hi, my name is Naomi LaPlanche. I'm from Dorchester. I'm a mom of 5. I recently just had a 3-month-old baby.
Congratulations.
Local 4 has changed my life. It had provided a great home for me and my kids. I'm doing something that I love, heavy equipment the loaders, excavators. I'm a first-year apprentice right now, but when I do graduate, it do brings a better future for my kids and for myself, for them to go to college and things like that. So I am very proud to be a local 4.
Thank you. You said I'm sorry, how old was your youngest?
I just had a 3-month-old.
So tell me about that, being a mom in the trades, and how you feel you're being supported, or areas where there could be some more support.
Being a mom, I have a big family, a big support system right now, because being an operating engineer in 4 years, that's something that I really, really want to do.
Okay.
And they've been very, very supportive.
You found the local was very supportive of your...
Yes, they're very supportive. My family's very supportive and things like that.
Yeah, no, I'd love to talk about more how that support looks. I really appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
Nathan?
Good afternoon. My name is Nathan Santos. I'm from Mattapan. I'm also a proud local 103 electrician. I'm also a 2014 graduate of Madison Park High School.
Wonderful.
Madison Park, the electrical program gave me the structure and the basis, my foundation for jumping into Local 103. And I'm really glad that I decided to go there and follow through with my decisions thus far. I'm a 4th-year apprentice at Local 103, and in about another 6 months or so, I'll be able to go for my journeyman's license. I am also one of 6, the only one that has a trade thus far. Hopefully, one of my younger siblings will also jump in the trades as well. So hopefully this does go through and they make the decision. I believe we do need to have more union careers in Boston. Sorry, that's about it.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Zach?
How's it going? My name's Zach DeTaco from Dorchester, Mass. I'm a local 4 apprentice. What a union means to me, I come from a strong family background where aunts, my dad, grandfathers were all involved in the trades. I think the best part is the quality of life that it can provide for you and your family down the road. I know most of the apprentices are young, on the younger side, but like I said, it's building that foundation. The resources that the local gives to you, the resources to the school, the agents are always available, faculty in the offices. I think the other best part is, I think it's an honor to say, that we all help work hand in hand building the city of Boston that we, all grew up in. So that's pretty much it.
Thank you. The next 4, I have Kiana Johnson. Still here. Victor Fernandez. I think it's Ajani. Who's here? So it's Kiana, is that? Yes. Okay, and then is Victor here? Okay, excellent.
Everybody's local 4. Can you mix it up, please?
They signed up. I'm going in the order of signing up.
No offense, but these are apprentices. These
I'm not an apprentice. I go in order of how folks signed up. Ajani, I think McAuliffe Lynch, Kedelis. So if Ajani's not here, I'm going to skip that person. There. Oh, okay. And then Stacy Sullivan. Excellent. Okay. Kiana?
Hi, I'm Kiana Johnson from Dorchester. A little shy. I'm also a proud member of Local 4 Operating Engineers. I have 10 years in, and I don't know what else to
No,
say.
this is great. I mean,
I'm like not a public speaker, so.
no, you're doing just fine.
Locals 4 has been good for me and my family.
Mhm.
I'm a mother, a wife, and I went through the 4-year apprenticeship program, and it helped me a lot. And I'm very thankful to have the job that I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Victor?
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. My name is Victor Fernandez. I'm from Mattapan. I'm a proud member of Local 4. Local 4 changed my life. I used to be a truck driver for about 12 years. Used to work 70 hours a week, straight time, no time and a half. Now I'm making time and a half, sometimes double, and I got great benefits. And I got a little peace of mind of when I retire, I have a pension. Because my dad and my uncle, they're a little older now, and they don't have that. So Local 4's been really good to me, and I'm sure it's going to be even better in the future.
Thank you. Cadelis?
Good afternoon, Council. I am Kate Elise Cartagena at that. I am a proud first-year apprentice to 103, and a former graduate of Madison Park High School. And I'm actually here to speak upon Madison Park and how they actually do help their students and actually do provide opportunities for all of their students. And most for the trades, you know, overall, it's well spread. But I'd like to say that I am actually happy to be one of those people to have that opportunity, considering that I got co-op because of the connections throughout the local and the teachers that work at Madison Park. And the fact that it did change my life, considering the fact that I am one of the first to actually graduate high school in my family and actually get a career, or at least start a career, and actually be like, represent that females can do it too, especially the ones in my family and anywhere else. Like, it doesn't matter, male or female or whatever it is. You can actually achieve what you want to do and excel in what you want to be. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Stacy? Hi.
Hello, my name is Stacy Sullivan, and I am a fourth-year apprentice for Local 103. And I guess I'll start by saying the union's given me the opportunity to independently support myself in a way that I was unable to do for almost the 10 years that I lived in Alston, Brighton before this. I graduated from college and got a bachelor's degree, and I graduated in 2009 during the recession. And myself, as just like everyone else I knew, we couldn't get jobs. I was working a minimum of like 3 part-time jobs all the time, constantly, still working paycheck to paycheck, twice as many hours as I do now, and half the amount of money. Couldn't pay my bills, couldn't pay my student debt. And so I finally, I just decided to get into the union. My dad was in it, and I always wanted to do my own thing, but I never realized until I was in it the opportunities that really that you really get. I always considered it something that was just physical labor, and I feel like the notion that it is just physical labor is still out there for younger kids, and did not ever realize that I would be standing in front of city council talking to them about my experience, letting my voice be heard. And I think that since then, I've been able to, stay on track and be able to move myself forward. I felt for years I was stuck like in a hole, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger. The debt kept growing because I couldn't even afford to pay my student loans like on the monthly basis. I was deferring them forever. And I'm not even a journeyman yet, and I'm already 100%, you know, like better than I was like 2 years ago. And not only that, like the health insurance, before I got into the union, I was not considered poor enough, not considered rich enough where I couldn't afford free health care. But if I wanted it, I would have to pay like $800 a month, like more than my rent. And considering how much I like living in Boston, I like couldn't afford to live here, and was considering moving back to Lawrence, but I ended up, you know, because of the union, I ended up gaining all the resources and help I needed, and I don't know, I guess people don't really realize that those aspects are, you know, you're going to work, but then all that's already paid for, so you don't have to put that on top of everything else. And yeah, I work for an establishment that listens, retains, and reacts to my concerns, my needs, and my talents, and I only hope that that can be spread, that information can be spread more to younger kids and future journey tradeswomen and all that. So, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Taisha Thompson, Jeff Salabu.
Excuse me. I'm Brother Lowe, and I'm not going to use the grandfather clause if you don't mind, because I'm old, I got to get out of here, and I appreciate the fact that the unions are here and the people are here. But, you know, what bothers me most is the fact that I'm glad to see Mr. Flynn here, because we've been fighting the same fight since when his father was doing the same thing. Here, many, many, many years later, we're still fighting the same fights. And it's a beautiful thing that you can pick out some people and testify. That's a beautiful, they're entitled, that's good. That's a good thing. But as much as the people that you pick out and bring up here, there's a whole list of people outside that don't have an opportunity. These people got jobs. These are not the people we should be talking to. We need to be talking to the people who don't have jobs. And I commend you for getting in the union and doing what you got to do, because you have to take care of your families too. But there's a whole lot of people that are outside that don't have the opportunity to even work and get a job. So maybe, excuse me, sister, excuse me. We also have, maybe the next hearing we could have people come and testify that don't have jobs. Maybe we should go that way. Like I said, these gentlemen are entitled to work. Every one of these gentlemen, white, black, and whatever, are entitled to work. But we're entitled to work also. And this, you know what? This is the most diversity I've seen, and you know it, Brian. This is the most diversity I've seen in construction workers, because I don't see this on the street. I don't see this on the street. So I'm not here. We would like a working situation. And this young lady who here said that they have 300 women. If that's the case, there shouldn't be no problem getting women. With 300 women, 300 women, that's a lot of compliance. That's a lot of compliance if you can employ 300 women. But one of the main things also that's so very important is training. Okay? I'm sure you got skilled people. Okay? Nothing wrong with that, whatever. But there's people who are not skilled that also need to work. Maybe you should work out something where there's a lot of people come even from the Caribbean that have skills. Maybe we should work out some kind of test, train them and see what kind of test where they could start, maybe not as an apprentice, but been in the business for 30 years, 40 years, and are skilled, okay? Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to say that, and I also want to leave by saying, how much longer are we going to have to come, how much longer am I going to have to look in Brian's face and say, okay, he looks at me and says, okay, we got a few more people. But to me, it's not enough, you know, especially under the situation. We know the stats. We look at the fact that we're not even able to afford living. This gentleman said he's not even can't even live in Boston no more. So we need good paying wages and good jobs. That's all. And I hope his son don't have to come up, and we're still fighting the same battle.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Taisha Thompson, Jeff Saliba, sorry, again, handwriting. Patrick Kelly, Margaret Nelson. Patrick Kelly, Margaret Nelson. Thomas Wall. Is Thomas Wall here? Okay. And Tony Richards? Okay. Michael Hess. Ricardo Knight. Katrina Brown. Okay. Stephen Walker. Martin Castillo. Okay. Caleb Irizarry. Stephen J. Porter. Michael Burns. Cindy Coe or Koff. Come on down. Come on down. Okay, that's our next four. Please.
Hi, my name is Taisha Thompson. Can you hear me okay? Thank you guys for being here. I know this is drawn out. But I am Taisha Thompson. I live in South Boston. I am a mother of 3, and I'm also a proud journeywoman union worker with Local 6 Heat and Frost Insulators. So this was a great opportunity for me to get in the union. I actually went through Building Pathways, the first session they had back in 2012. Brian encouraged me to join with the opportunity to have a great living wage. I did have some trouble in my past, so I obtained a criminal record. So this was a great opportunity for me to get a good paying job that would keep me from getting in trouble and, having a better life for my children. So when I started, my youngest was 2. My middle son was 9. My oldest was 17. So I worked with Liz and some of the other ladies with childcare, getting childcare for women that work non-traditional hours. But I had support, my children being so far apart that the oldest helped, the middle one helped. My youngest son now is currently 8, so Dad brings him to school in the morning. But I've been able to not depend on anyone to help me support my family, as far as been depending on transitional assistance, et cetera, et cetera. I think the number one thing that we need now is compliance. And all of these people, all the jobs that come through Boston come through the city. Like, they have to get some kind of okay to get the work, to perform the work in the city. So if you guys can, city council can put their heads together to find a way, because where there's a will, there's a way to keep people in compliance. We can figure out who's not, what people aren't getting paid right, or what jobs don't have the minorities that they need to be in compliance, because we all live in the city. Gentrification is huge because we can't really afford the apartments that are being built, but there should be a way that us living in the city could be able to work the jobs that are built in the city that we live in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Jeff? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Taisha? I'm your city councilor, district councilor. If there's anything, thank you. And if there's anything I can do to be helpful, please let me know. Okay, very good. Yep, thank you for being here.
I don't know whether to wish you a good afternoon or good evening, but if anybody remembers the old TV guides, the evening started at 4. So I wish you good evening since it's 25 past 4. My name is Jeff Saliba. I'm originally from Mattapan, and I've spent over 25 years in Rosendale and West Roxbury, where my wife and I live and work. I'm also a proud 29-year building trades member. In my early years, the social narrative was that going to college was the only way to get ahead in this world. I tried college. I wasn't good at it. I worked in the construction industry as a non-union laborer, where I was told what I was going to make for a wage and wasn't even offered health benefits or retirement package. Living with my parents, I felt less than. I didn't like that feeling. I couldn't get ahead. I remember that sinking feeling. That social narrative I just spoke about told me the American dream wasn't for people like me. Then I had an opportunity to become a member of the Heat and Frost Insulators and Allied Workers Local 6 as an asbestos worker. It was dangerous work, but it paid good wages and benefits, and after a time I was able to transition into that local's apprenticeship program as a mechanical insulator. I worked hard, and a few years after my apprenticeship I was able to save enough money to put a down payment on a house of my own in Rosendale, where I lived for many years. I can remember the pride I felt in the ability to buy my own home. As a former organizer for my union, I had the opportunity to empathize and see and hear how the non-union workers managed the American dream. They are just like me. College wasn't for them. Many are from South American companies huddled in small apartments trying to get ahead. While some are offered some meager benefits and an option to pay for a 401k, more often than not, they don't make enough money to pay for that health insurance or put anything toward their retirement package, causing many to manipulate the system so they do have health insurance. As an organizer, being able to offer some of them memberships into my union, knowing their whole economic status would change, has been the highlight of my career. No college education could compare. I know that to be true because at 40 years of age, I paid my way through college with the money I made as a union member. What can I say? My learning curve was a little different at that age. Being a union member has given my family and me the dignity and respect that every worker deserves when in their home, workplace, and in their community. And because I'm a union member, that dignity will continue in retirement because of my retirement package. I won't have to make that decision between medication and something to eat. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Mr. Wall?
Hi, my name is Thomas Wall, and I worked minimum jobs basically my whole life up until I got into the trades. And I did the carpentry and stuff before I got into the local 6 insulators. And
Could you speak closer to the microphone? Thank you.
is that better?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So once I got into the trades, the building trades, the insulators, it changed everything in my life. And I just want to say that, coming from the non-union side, doing carpentry and stuff, then coming into the insulators, it really made a huge difference in the way you can handle yourself. So I just want to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, councilors. My name is Michael Burns. I'm a business representative for Sheet Metal Workers Local 17 out of Lowell Mills, Dorchester. Originally Dorchester kid, came from a working class family of Irish immigrants. My father's a proud and recently retired member of Local 4, operating engineers. I'm a member of the Sheet Metal Workers, proud member of the Sheet Metal Workers Union. I went to college in the city, got 2 degrees, and compiled debt that I'll be paying for a long time. And those degrees could not offer me the security, the health care, and retirement benefits that I get from being a proud member of my local. Everyone should have access to these union careers. And I understand the frustrations I'm hearing from the crowd here, from some of the people. And, our local has done what we can to be partners with Madison Park. Dennis DeLacio, a South Boston guy, was a teacher over there for many years, and we take at least 2 or 3 of those every year. And, I challenge the other unions and ourselves to do a better job of working partnership with them and taking more people in and giving people opportunities. So I'm just here to say that Boston needs more union careers. We fully support this ordinance, and thank you for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Cindy? No? Do you want to?
Hi, good evening. My name is Cindy Cousin, and I'm from Local 223. I'm a laborer of 21 years. I'm from Dorchester and Boston, Mass., and I'm a mother. I'm a proud union member of Building and Trades. I just wanted to collaborate because I kind of had an outburst at the moment because that kind of touched me when he said the people out there. Well, I am the people from out there. I've been in 21 years. I've paved the way for the upcoming apprentices that's working now. I've held picket signs. I stood in lines. I stood in front of buildings with the non-union companies so they wouldn't get in. Did the door knocking. Did everything possible to try to get this thing here right. The union has changed my life. Before I got in the union, I had to work 2 jobs just to make my ends meet. Yeah, I had to work 2 jobs just to make my ends meet, and 1 job should be enough. Today, I'm not just working for my job. My job's working for me. I'm getting ahead. I have a retirement plan. I have the best health plan, a pension, and annuity. The union protects you. The union has given me life-changing money. Today, I'm able to provide for my family and with good wages. I'm so grateful and so thankful for being a union member. I don't know what my life would be if this opportunity didn't come my way. I thank God for opening that door. Everyone should have the access to these careers. I'm here today because we need more union careers. I thank y'all for giving me the opportunity to speak, and for the upcoming, members coming in through the different trades. Hang in there and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Liz, I think Skidmore, William Young. Okay. Pat Fantasia, Ironworkers. Okay. I'm going to just spell this. They have an N-G-E-S-T-I. Serrano, electrician. Okay. Darius Hines. Let's see. Dominic Denuzio. Okay. Anna Mao. Alonzo Johnson. Richard Pena. Sharif Hartgrove. Ricky Thompson. I have Flatbrooks, I think they testified already, from Beige. I think we had someone testify. Flatbrooks last name? Yeah, that's Priscilla. That's Priscilla's son. Alex Papali. Rafael Mancia. Aaron Tanaka, I think, left already. Kevin Walsh. Or Walls? Yeah, Walsh. Okay, if you can stand up here, that's 3. And Trevor Milan. Axel Lopez. Axel's here. Is Trevor here too? Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
All right, thank you, counselors. We need a new mic for the tall people in the crowd. Thank you for holding this hearing and for sticking around to hear the folks from the community. My name is Liz Skidmore. I've been a union carpenter for 30 years. I live in Eggleston. I am here with regards from our Tom Flynn, our Executive Secretary Treasurer, and Steve Joyce, our Political Director. So it's a pleasure to get to speak to you. I'm also the co-founder of the policy group on tradeswomen's issues. Since I first got into the apprenticeship and realized what a fantastic job this was, I've pretty much devoted the last 30 years to bringing more women, particularly prioritizing women of color, into these union jobs. I work with the policy group on tradeswomen's issues, Northeast Center Tradeswomen's Equity, a lot of what Mary talked about, so I won't review that again. I do want to mention a couple specific things that the carpenters have done. Within the apprenticeship, we're now at, of Boston residents members, we're now at 14% women, and 61% of those are women of color.
In the carpenters.
In the Carpenters Union. So we're really thrilled with that. We're not stopping. We've set a goal of 20% women by 2020. So anything you can do to help us along, keep expediting that. We've made significant progress in the Commonwealth. We were at 2 to 3% for about 40 years, and we're now at 8.37% women with an apprenticeship in the state.
For the whole,
For the state, for all building trades apprentices throughout the state, and I believe Mary gave you a chart that sort of spells that out. That said, I appreciate what you, Councilor Edwards, said and what Brian Doherty said. There absolutely is a history of racism and sexism and exclusion in the building trades. When I started 30 years ago, I was the only woman almost every job I was on. That still happens sometimes, but not as much. And when we've been able to target big projects like the Everett Encore Casino, we've had over 300 women that worked on that project. And they have monthly lunches. And we have a photo which we think is the most women on a particular job in a photo in the history of the world from that project. So there are important things happening, and also that photo is mostly women of color.
Where's the photo?
I have it, if we can talk. Just a little bit from the Carpenters, and then I want to get a couple concrete things. So they hired me 20 years ago as a business rep organizer. I wasn't the first, but I was one of the first. I was also the first business manager that I'm aware of in New England for the Carpenters Union. We now have 5 women on staff. We've recently appointed 22 women to our local union e-boards and delegate body, and half of them are women of color. And today, I actually can make a public announcement. Our regional council delegate board, we just appointed an African-American woman, young adult out of Connecticut, so not Boston, but still part of the regional effort to that board, and she's amazing. So we're really thrilled about that. So I bring that up to just say, there's many layers to this. There's apprenticeship, there's retention of journey women, but then there's also all the career ladders, whether becoming a foreman or a company owner, but also within the union. We also have full-time women instructors within our trades. I know there's another female apprenticeship director here, that those career ladders are also an important part of this conversation. I spent about 20 years trying to get more women in and essentially failing. And about 10 years ago when we started the policy group on tradeswomen's issues, that's when we started going from the 2 to 3 to the almost 9% now. Just a couple quick game changers. We need an integrated supply and demand strategy. And the way Councilor Turner talked about this new commission, it almost sounds like it's focused on the supply side. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think if the council can think about what's our supply strategy, what's our demand strategy. Secondly, there's a concept of lead from where you are that we got from Christchurch, New Zealand, after the big earthquake there. They actually got up to 18% women in rebuilding the city, and they've got a great report, which is on the PGTI website, on how they did that. They have 5 tips. One of them is lead from where you are. And so for me, what I need the city to do is work on the demand side, work on the enforcing it, getting the contractors to do what they're supposed to do. There's a whole bunch of partners working on the supply side, although more are certainly welcome. But if I don't need somebody who can do demand to only do supply, if you know what I mean, because you all have a role in the supply side. I sort of joke that figuring out how many apprentices to bring into the union is kind of like, if you'll bear with me, having congestive heart failure. You're trying to bring enough fluid into the system so the heart can beat, but not so much fluid that there's too much fluid in the lungs or too many people laid off. And what you all can do, if you just try to finagle that balance of the wafer, I'm mixing this up a little bit, but it's incredibly hard. But in my mind, what you all can do is get those lungs as healthy as possible. So you're the demand side, you're saying the contractors want people, the message is getting back to the apprenticeship, back to the unions, back to the non-union, back to any, workforce developers, the WIOA system, Mass Workforce, which I'm also on the board of. We need a robust demand effort. And because for years, all folks did was recruit and train women, but it was like trying to push a string up a pipe, to mix my metaphors. But now that we've got demand working much better, not as good as it could, we're really putting people to work. So to me, what the city can do is really focus on demand in addition to the supply stuff, but don't leave the demand behind. I am nervous about the the fact that the union sector is well organized, there's a there, we're structured, there's people to meet with, and that the non-union sector is not. So as you figure out the details of this, I ask that you hold my sector, the union sector, to the highest possible standards, but that you absolutely ensure you are not holding the non-union sector to a lower standard. And that's going to be very hard to do because they, by nature, aren't organized. There's not the same kind of people to come meet with you as there are on the union side. And then lastly, you would ask a couple concrete things to do. One is, our Build a Life That Works campaign that I think you have some of these flyers. We're doing these monthly Tradeswomen Tuesdays outreach events. We got them onto buses, we got them onto shelters, those are now down. Help us get them onto the MBTA, because that's where people are, that's where people travel. Help us get them onto the MBTA. I worked very hard at the JP Rocks development planning and failed. It may be too late, but to the degree you can help tie expedited permitting to meeting workforce goals, that would move this conversation forward. A lot of this housing that's coming in is very small players. It's less than 50,000 square feet. The workforce goal numbers are not being applied, but collectively it's a very significant amount of work. And so if folks got expedited permitting but had to actually meet the goals, even if it was a smaller project, that would help move this conversation forward. And this is a tricky issue, but the CDCs have a terrible record around safety, around the underground economy in construction, and also around particularly not hiring women. And we cannot build low-income housing at the expense of the workers. And one of the ways to get people out of poverty is to get them a good job. So let's figure out ways to support the CDCs to continue to build affordable housing, but do it with contractors that follow the law, because they're not. And then lastly, the public procurement laws are complicated. And many people smarter than me have tried to sort of parse things out. I think a potential promising strategy would be, they require the lowest responsible bidder to be chosen. And if we could include meeting workforce goals in our definition of responsible, then that might be a way to hold contractors accountable, reward the ones who are meeting those goals, and keep the ones who aren't. Because right now, the contractors who aren't meeting the goals just get the next job because they're low bidder. They just keep getting. There's no consequence to them. But if we could look at including meeting those goals as a part of the definition of responsible, it might be a way to influence that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Council. My name is Dominic Denizio. I'm a lifetime resident of West Roxbury. I'm also journeyman local 223. I was asked today how the unions affected my life. Before the union, I was working for a corporation, earning a low wage with minimal health care. Along the way, I've had some health issues, and with that came some expensive medical bills. Now with the union, I go to work every day and earn a respectable wage, but also me and my wife have access to the best health care available. I fully support an ordinance that puts Boston residents to work. All too much on the job sites, we see the jobs being taken by people outside the city and sometimes even outside the state. I'd like to thank the council for the time, but also like to thank Brian Doherty and Mayor Walsh for fighting for the working class and Boston residents. Thank you.
Thank you.
How's it going? I'm Kevin Walsh, Local 12. I'm a fourth-generation union member. The unions have provided a great life for my family since we came from Ireland, and I think for what we're talking about today, a big part of it starts from the foundation. It needs to be stressed in schools that there are other paths for children that don't include college. I myself have a college degree, but I don't think that it was my best time spent. I think that kids need to know that there are other paths for them, including the building trades.
Thank you.
I'll keep it short. My name's Trevor Mile, and I'm Local 12 member.
grew up in South Boston, live in Charlestown now. Pretty much overnight since I joined the union, it's, night and day. The benefits that I'm still learning about. So, to grow up in Boston and pretty much not even be able to afford to live here, just barely. I mean, it's important that we are here talking about this. So that's all I got. Thanks.
Appreciate that. Axel Lopez?
Yes. Good afternoon. My name is Axel Lopez. I'm from Dorchester, originally from Mattapan. I'm a proud union member of Plumbers Local 12. The union has changed my life for the better. Before this, I was a server at a restaurant. I did a ton of jobs, like different restaurants in the city. Didn't earn much, and the opportunity opened up at a shop in Canistral where my uncle works. I think everyone should have access to these union careers, and I'm here today because Boston needs more union careers. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Kevin Williams, James Keenan. Okay. Carlo Lopez. Okay. Clifford Lovelace. 1, 2, 3. And Joshua Vincent. 4. Okay.
How you doing? My name is Kevin Williams of Dorchester. I'm a proud member of Local 12 Boston and a 2015 graduate of Building Pathways. The union has provided a lot for me since the two short years that I've been lucky to be a part of it. But I think the biggest thing that it's been able to do for me is give me peace of mind. I think everyone should be allowed to have the opportunity to be able to know that they'll always have a secure future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is James Keenan. I'm a resident of Dorchester. I'm a new husband, hopefully with hopes of starting a bigger family on the way. I'm a local 12 plumber. I grew up son of a plumber, non-union. 65 years old now. He struggles to not only find work, but no retirement in the future, no plans for it. So as far as getting into the union and seeing, what they do, especially for apprentices, as far as training, requiring them to put into a pension plan, health care, it's going to change my life for the better, and it's going to change everyone else in my life for the better. So that's why I support continuing the union career.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Clifford Lovelace. I'm a Boston resident. I currently live in Hyde Park. Grew up in Boston my entire life. I'm an apprentice, local 12, proud apprentice. I'm happy that I have the opportunity to actually work in the trade. I have 2 younger sons, and hopefully one day, if this gets passed, that they could actually be able to get in the trades, and it's not like a hard thing for them to get into the trades. I would love to see more Boston residents working in the trades. I think it's a good thing. Hopefully, there's a lot of work right now. Hopefully, there continues to be a lot of work, and we could actually employ and hire a lot more Boston residents to work in the city and help. I went to college, but it really wasn't my thing. So I had an opportunity while I was in college to actually get into the union, and I decided to go to the union for great benefits, pension, healthcare, all of that. I worked in healthcare for like the last 7 years of my life, and I made the jump to do this, and I don't regret it at all. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Joshua Vincent. I'm from Rosendale, Boston. I'm a proud member of the Local 12 Plumbers. The union has changed my life drastically. I was a college student. My father's actually a plumber, non-union. and he encouraged me to join Local 12, and it's been the best decision of my life. And I try to encourage my friends to join locals because of the benefits, the schooling, the training is just bar none. So just want to let you know that. Thank you.
Thank you. Kimberly Garside? Patrick Riley? I think it's Yasmin or Santiago?
Need to
Okay.
go.
Oh, my God. You missed that. I'm sorry. I didn't. Oh, you did? Okay, great. Is it
Shamia.
Shamia, okay. 1, 2, 3, and then Chanton Green? Shatan. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak today. My name is Kimberly Garside. I am a 23-year member of Plumbers Local 12. I am born and raised in Dorchester, still reside there with my husband. I was one of those inner city kids who went to Boston Public School and really didn't have a chance to go to college because I'm one of 8. I had the opportunity to do a pre-apprentice program and get to learn about all the trades back before Building Pathways was in its fruition there. The union, Plumbers Local 12, gave me the opportunity to learn a craft, learn a trade, something that nobody could take away from me. I've also moved up in my career, and now I am the assistant training coordinator for Plumbers Local 12, and I am actively seeking out outreach to all women, people of color, and Boston residents. And I also am trying to keep the retention rate up as well. I am also the chair of the Women's Committee there, and we hold a Women's Committee monthly for all of the women in our membership. Thank you.
I think you touched on a really important point. We've heard about supply, demand, but also retention.
Retention is huge.
Keeping
Yep.
them when we do recruit and maintaining and making sure they can grow. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you.
Patrick?
Hello, my name is Patrick Riley. I'm a 4th generation Local 12 plumber, and I've seen the impact that the local has made on so many people around me. It's a great opportunity. It's a great establishment. It's a great organization to belong to, and I truly believe that we should extend this to as many people as we can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thanks for this hearing. My name is Shamia Turner. I grew up in Dorchester. I live in Hyde Park right now. I am a graduate of Building Pathways, and I'm a journeywoman with Local 17 Sheet Metal Workers in Boston. And I'm happy to speak on behalf of unions today because without them, I wouldn't have a retirement, I wouldn't have a savings. I would be struggling under a pile of student debt right now, and I've been able to pay that off and able to look forward to other things in my life than just struggling. When I got in, I could count the number of women on one hand. Now, because of the strides that unions have made to being more inclusive, there are at least 20 women in my local now, which is much better than it was, and it's getting better every year. So as the unions are becoming more diverse, and I think they do a much better job than the non-union sector does, and in providing benefits and all that, I would like for this commission to focus on also challenging the unions to include more women and people of color into their leadership roles as well. We need, in order to keep this pipeline going, we need representation. It's powerful when you can see a woman or a person of color as a business agent. So that's what I'd like to say today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Shatan?
Hello. My name is Shatan Green. I'm from Roxbury. I'm a husband, a father of 2, a brother, and also a role model. I'm also a graduate of Madison Park High. Basically, I really didn't know too much about the unions, but I know that I was in a position in my life where I had to do something. Had a criminal record. Looking for a job was hard. My wife at the time was working, and I wanted to support her the best way I can before we even started a family. So I was looking for jobs, and nothing really like clicked with me. I came across Building Pathways, and it almost was like, are you serious? Is this for real? So I went through it, and now I'm a journeyman for Local 550. I just got my license August 31st.
Congratulations.
And thank you. And since then, since graduating, I told numerous of my friends about it who also went through the program, and you could see how their life started to change too. So it just started to be a great thing, how I wasn't so confident in building a family. Building Pathways and the unions helped me do that. And then from telling people about it and watch them experience the same thing, it was kind of cool. And just when females have questions on how they can get in, it's like you can give them an answer. So definitely, unions are the way to go. I'm a very proud union member, and everyone should have access to these opportunities, especially if you live in the city. Definitely. So thank you.
Thank you. I have just two more, Jerry Williams and Bruce Turner. Okay, are you Mr.? You're Jerry. Okay, and anyone else? Okay, so then we'll finish with Mr. Williams.
Good evening, how you doing? My name is Jerry Ellis Williams. I'm from Dorchester. I am a father, a brother, and also a role model in my community. I'm a Local 550, and I'm a first-year apprentice. And to piggyback off of what Shaitan said, he was actually the person that referenced me to Building Pathways, which ever since I joined, I graduated last year in December 14th. And ever since I graduated in just a year, my life's changed immensely. I'm able to support my daughter and my family in ways that I couldn't imagine before. I was a full-time student athlete. I graduated with a degree in criminal justice, and I'm not even in that field, and this is just an opportunity that I wish I knew about prior to even attending college, to like what most people say, college isn't for everybody. Again, I went there thinking that that's what I was supposed to do. That's how I'll be able to survive in the world. And I'm surviving much better now that I'm in a union. And I just wish that, like I said, I knew about this a long time ago. I wouldn't have as much debt as I've had, which thankful to the union, I'm gonna be able to take care of in no time. And I just wish this opportunity could be afforded to more people that come from the community that I come to. So it's more than just the word of mouth like I got from somebody, and that's just one person that told me, and my life changed. I'm pretty sure if more people knew about the union and if there was more ways to get the word out to local kids in the city, we'll start seeing more diverse sets. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's concluded the folks who signed up. Anybody who want to? Yep, go ahead.
How you doing? My name is Jose Barboza, and I'm a Dorchester resident. I just became a father, and I'm a proud member of, proud member of 103. And the union has really changed my life. Before, I was working 2 full-time jobs, didn't have no time to spend with my family. And and now I have time to spend with my family and also have time to give back to my community. Also, it has given me the best benefits in healthcare and pay rate that I've ever had. And I'd say one of the best things about the union has given me a career that I'm proud of.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm short. Good evening. My name is Savi Mandoretti. I'm from New Hall Street in Dorchester, Boston, Mass. I'm a stepmother, a Little League coach, and a Building Pathways graduate. I'm also a Journey Level proud member of the Boston Building Trades Union of Local 537. The union has changed my life. They've helped me buy a home. I have fair wages, great benefits. This is good for people. Everyone should have access in the union careers, and I'm here today because Boston needs more union careers. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. So this concludes our hearing and public testimony. And so I'm just going to see if my colleague, Councilor Flynn, has any closing remarks.
I just want to say thank you to everybody that testified and shared your story with us. It was very informative. It's helpful to us. Your story is very important, and, you know, with the leadership of Councilor Edwards and the Walsh administration, you know, we're proud of what you've accomplished, and we're going to work hard on this issue. And again, I just want to say thank you to my good friend Lydia Edwards for her leadership on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank everyone for coming out here and staying the whole entire time. This is a wonderful conversation that you essentially started, Councilor Turner, so thank you for your leadership. And this is a conversation we're going to continue to have. So for those of you who don't know about the process, we have produced a draft ordinance. What usually happens at this point is we take all this feedback. We will likely have a working session wherein we will talk about parts of the ordinance that we want to change, that we can improve based on your feedback, based on concerns expressed, and based off of ideas that just came up, even, you know, from the community. After that working session, then we would propose the ordinance for a vote. And so during this entire process, it's open to the public for you to come, give feedback, and be part of that conversation. Thank you so much for all the locals that showed up today. Thank you to the industry folks that showed up and the folks who testified earlier. With that, I'm going to conclude this hearing.